My father told me I would never make it in tech. He said it at the dinner table on a Tuesday night when I was 14 years old and holding a laptop I had saved up for with babysitting money. He said it again at Thanksgiving when I was 17 and told the family I wanted to study computer science. He said it to his business partners at a barbecue, loud enough for me to hear through the kitchen window, the summer before I left for college. He said my older sister Amanda was the one with real instincts, the one with the head for business, the one who would carry the Walker name forward. I was the dreamer, the one who didn't have what it takes. 6 years after I walked out of that house with a suitcase and $600 to my name, a desperate email landed on my desk. A struggling tech company in Austin, Texas, was begging my firm for a strategic partnership. Their revenue was collapsing. Their flagship product was failing. Their clients were leaving. The company was called Walker Systems. The sender was Greg Walker, CEO and founder, my father, and he had absolutely no idea who I was now. The meeting was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. 2 p.m., my conference room, my building, my city. My father would walk through the glass doors on the 42nd floor, sit across from me, and pitch his dying company to the daughter he had written off. He would shake my hand and not recognize my face, and I had all night to decide what I was going to do about it. I need to tell you how I got here. That Tuesday morning started the way every Tuesday started. I arrived at Novatech headquarters before 7, while the building was still mostly empty. I liked this hour, the quiet before 312 people filled the halls with noise and urgency and decisions that needed my signature. Corner office on the 42nd floor, glass walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. That morning the fog was thick, and the Golden Gate Bridge was somewhere behind it, invisible, the way a lot of things in my life had been invisible until they weren't. I was working through partnership proposals. Novatech received dozens every quarter. Most were mid-tier firms hoping to ride our momentum. I read fast, annotated faster, and dismissed most within 2 pages. I ran a company valued at $4.5 billion. I didn't have time for anything that wasn't exceptional. Leah Chen walked in at 7:15 carrying her tablet and a coffee I hadn't asked for. My COO sharp, efficient. The kind of person who remembered your coffee order after hearing it once and never forgot a deadline or a grudge. She had been with me for 4 years, since Novatech was 12 people in a rented office in Oakland. I trusted her more than anyone in the building. She set the coffee on my desk. 4 proposals flagged urgent this quarter, she said. 3 were standard. The 4th was different. Smaller company, out of Austin. It came in late last night, Leah said. Flagged urgent. A company called Walker Systems. They're requesting a face-to-face meeting within the week. Walker Systems. My hand stopped mid-reach for the coffee cup. Half a second, maybe less. But inside that half second the room tilted and righted itself, and I was 14 years old again, standing in a living room in Austin, Texas, holding a laptop, watching my father look at the screen for 4 seconds before turning back to the television. I picked up the coffee, took a sip, set it down, asked Leah to pull up the email on the main screen. Walker Systems. I hadn't heard that name spoken out loud in 6 years. I hadn't typed it into a search bar. I hadn't let myself think about it on purpose, the way you don't let yourself think about a scar once the wound is closed. And now it was on my screen, in my building, asking for my help. Leah left to get the full attachment printed. I read the email alone. My jaw tightened. One hand went flat on the desk, the way it always did when I was processing information that carried weight. The email was professional, well written, signed by Greg Walker, CEO and founder. The language was measured, corporate, careful. Phrases like exploring synergies and strategic alignment. A mention of evolving market conditions. A request for an expedited timeline. I had reviewed hundreds of proposals from struggling companies. I knew what desperation looked like when it wore a suit. This email was wearing its best one. I opened the 15-page proposal document attached to the email. I read it the way I read everything, like a surgeon examining an X-ray, looking for what was wrong and not what was right. The numbers told the story the email had tried to dress up. Revenue had declined 31% over 3 fiscal years. 4 major enterprise clients lost in the last 18 months. 2 to Meridian Tech, our biggest rival. Their flagship product, Syncor, was an enterprise data optimization platform built in 2019 with no significant updates since 2022. Clients were complaining about integration failures, cash reserves sufficient for approximately 8 months at current burn rate. I paused on the revenue chart. 3 years ago, Walker Systems had been billing $42 million a year. Now it was $29 million and falling. I remembered the house I grew up in. 14 Maple Drive, Austin, Texas, big yard, 3-car garage, a pool my sister used more than I did. That house was paid for by this company. My father built Walker Systems from nothing, and it became his identity, his proof that he was right about everything. And now the numbers on my screen were the sound of that foundation cracking. There was a time when those numbers would have meant something different to me, when his success felt like my failure and his failure might have felt like my vindication. But I had spent 6 years building something of my own, something real, something that had nothing to do with him. And his company's decline wasn't my victory. It was just math. Cold, clear, indifferent math. The same kind I had been good at since I was a kid, even when nobody in that house wanted to notice. I turned to the last page of the proposal, the leadership team bios and photos. First name, Greg Walker, CEO and founder. I stared at his headshot. He was older than I remembered. Thinner face, same hard jawline. Same eyes that used to look through me at the dinner table like I was a chair that happened to be sitting in a chair. He was wearing a dark suit and a confident smile in the photo, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. I could tell, even in a corporate headshot, that the confidence was a performance. I had grown up watching that performance. I knew every seam. I hadn't seen his face in 6 years. Not in person, not in a photograph. I had trained myself not to search, not to check, not to type his name into any browser on any late night when the apartment was quiet and the old questions came knocking. And now here he was, on page 15 of a proposal that landed on my desk because his company was falling apart. Second name, Amanda Walker Ross, VP of Operations, my sister. I read Amanda's bio. Wharton MBA, joined Walker Systems in 2020, 1 year after I left Austin, led the expansion into healthcare data services, led the Enterprise Client Retention Initiative, led the Strategic Partnership Development Program. 3 major projects. I cross-referenced them against the data in the financial section. Healthcare expansion had burned through $1.2 million and produced 0 new clients. Client retention had lost 3 of the company's top 5 accounts. The partnership program had stalled after 2 exploratory meetings that went nowhere. My sister, the one with real business sense, the one Dad built his whole succession plan around. She was listed as VP of Operations of a company that was hemorrhaging clients and burning through cash reserves, and I was the one they were emailing for help. I felt something complicated when I read her name, not satisfaction, not pity, something in between that I wasn't ready to name. Third name, Victor Hale, board member. I didn't know him, former CFO of a regional firm, moved to a board seat in 2022. His bio was polished. Too polished for a company this size. I flagged him mentally as someone to research before the meeting. Everyone on that page was someone my father had trusted more than me. I closed the proposal, set it face down on the desk, stood up, walked to the window. The fog had burned off slightly. The Bay Bridge was visible now, gray steel emerging from white like a secret the city was slowly deciding to tell. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and felt the hum of the building through the window. Part of me said, reject the proposal. Send the standard decline letter. Let Walker Systems find another lifeline or fold quietly. It wasn't my problem. I owed Greg Walker nothing. Less than nothing. He hadn't come to my graduation. He hadn't called when I was eating ramen in a studio apartment in Oakland and pitching investors who kept saying no. 6 years of silence from that house. Not one voicemail, not one letter. Not one text that said, I'm sorry, or I was wrong, or I hope you're okay. But another part of me, the part I didn't like to acknowledge, felt something else. Not sympathy, not loyalty. Something colder and more honest. Curiosity. A quiet, patient 6-year-old curiosity that had been sitting in a room in the back of my mind, waiting. What would it feel like to sit across from him? To watch him pitch his failing company to the daughter he had dismissed? To hold all the power and let him see it? Was this revenge? Was this justice? Or was this just business? I didn't answer the question. I let it sit. Some questions are more useful when they stay open. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. The one turned face down. I didn't flip it over. I just looked at the back of the frame for a moment, the way you look at a door you're not ready to open, and then I looked away. I picked up the phone, pressed Leah's extension. The Walker Systems proposal. The Austin Company, what about it? Schedule a meeting, in person, tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m. That's fast, they just sent the email last night. Tell them we're interested in hearing their pitch. Full presentation. I want their senior leadership in the room. All of them? All of them. Greg Walker, Amanda Walker-Ross, Victor Hale, everyone who signed that proposal. I'll set it up. Conference room A? My conference room, the one on this floor. Got it. Anything else? I paused. One more thing. When you contact them, use my title and first name only. Brittany, CEO. No last name in the correspondence. No company bio attached. No photo. There was a beat of silence on the line. Any reason? I like to keep first meetings focused on the work. Leah didn't push it. She had worked with me long enough to know when a question was a door and when it was a wall. This one was a wall. After she hung up, I sat back down, looked at the proposal one more time, looked at my father's name on the signature line, traced the G in Greg with my eyes the way I used to trace letters in workbooks when I was a child, back when I still believed that if I was good enough and smart enough and quiet enough, he would eventually see me. 6 years ago, I closed a door and didn't look back. Tomorrow I was going to open it, on my terms, in my building, from my chair. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., my father would walk through those glass doors on the 42nd floor. He would shake my hand, look me in the eye, and pitch his dying company to the daughter he had told the world would never amount to anything. He would bring my sister, the one he had chosen over me. He would bring his board member, the one he had trusted instead of me. And he would sit across the table from a woman he didn't recognize, in a company he couldn't have imagined, and ask for help he didn't deserve. He had no idea who would be sitting across from him, but I did. And I had all night to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be when he found out. I was still sitting at my desk, staring at my father's name on the proposal, when the memories started. Not the big ones, not the screaming, not the door I closed at 2 a.m. 6 years ago. The small ones. The ones that cut deeper because nobody noticed them happening. The ones that accumulated like water damage inside a wall, invisible from the outside, rotting the structure from within. To understand what happened in that conference room the next day, you need to understand where it started. Not with a fight, not with a betrayal. It started with a 14-year-old girl and a laptop in a living room, and a father who couldn't be bothered to look. The summer I turned 14, I taught myself to code. Not because anyone told me to. I found an old Python tutorial on YouTube one afternoon in June, and something clicked. The logic of it. The way you could build something from nothing. The way the screen did exactly what you told it to do if you got the language right. The code didn't care who your sister was or what your father thought. It just worked, or it didn't, and either way the answer was yours to figure out. I spent 3 months in my bedroom, door closed, headphones on. I bought a second-hand ThinkPad at a garage sale for $40 with birthday money. Taught myself Python, then picked up enough HTML and SQL to be dangerous. I built an inventory management system, clean interface, functional database, a search feature that actually worked. My computer science teacher saw an early version and said she had never seen a student build something this complete on their own. I was 14. I hadn't told anyone in my family because I wanted to show the finished thing. I wanted it to be undeniable. I carried the ThinkPad downstairs on an August afternoon, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my fingers. The living room at 14 Maple Drive had leather couches, a big television, and a wall of framed photos. Amanda's debate trophies, Amanda and Dad at a tech conference, Amanda's internship photo. The wall was a shrine, and my sister was the saint. My father was by the kitchen island, phone pressed to his ear, talking about Amanda's summer internship at a firm in Dallas. She was 18, headed to Wharton. His voice was the one he used for things he was proud of. Warm, expansive, the kind of voice that didn't leave space for anyone else. I waited by the couch, laptop open, screen facing out. He glanced over, held up one finger, 1 second. The call went on for 3 more minutes. My arms started to ache. Finally, he covered the phone. "What's up, Britt?" I turned the screen toward him. "I built something. Can I show you?" He looked at the screen for about 4 seconds. Didn't step closer, didn't touch the laptop, didn't ask what it did or what language I used or how long it took. "That's nice, honey. Looks like fun." He turned back to the phone. "Sorry about that. Yeah, so Amanda's supervisor said she's the strongest intern they've had in 3 years. I stood in the living room holding that laptop for another 10 seconds after he turned away. The screen was still glowing, the app was still running, nobody was looking at it. I closed the laptop slowly, went back upstairs, sat on the bed. I didn't cry. I stared at the wall and I learned something that day that I've carried ever since. Cruelty doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just turns its back. That evening, Amanda came through the front door, home from Dallas for the weekend. Tan, confident, loud, shopping bags on one arm, phone in the other, laughing. She passed through the living room where I was on the couch, the ThinkPad open, still tweaking code. She glanced at the screen without slowing down. "What is that?" "An app I built, inventory management." She gave a small laugh, already halfway to the stairs. "Cute hobby." 2 words, not hostile, not mean exactly, just dismissive in the effortless way that only someone who has never had to prove themselves can be. Cute hobby. I replayed that in my head for years, not because it was the worst thing anyone ever said to me, because it was the most honest. That was exactly what my family saw when they looked at me. A girl with a cute hobby, not a coder, not a future engineer, not a threat, just a hobby. 3 years later, I was sitting at the dinner table on a Tuesday night in October. I was 17. Mom had made pot roast, which was always the signal that something was coming. Pot roast was my father's favorite, and she only made it when he wanted to have a family discussion. Amanda had flown in from Philadelphia the night before, unusual for a weeknight. My mother kept adjusting the napkins. Something was in the air. Midway through dinner, my father set down his fork, cleared his throat the way he did before board presentations. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of Walker systems." He paused. Amanda put her phone down. I stopped chewing. "Amanda, after you finish your MBA, I want you to come on board officially. VP of Operations. You'll shadow me for 2 years, learn the business from the inside. I'm building this for you." Amanda smiled. She wasn't surprised. She already knew. The dinner, the pot roast, the midweek flight from Philadelphia, it was all staged. I said the only thing I could think to say. "What about me?" The table went quiet. My father looked at me. Not unkindly. That was the worst part. Not with contempt or irritation. With the gentle, patient condescension of someone explaining something obvious to someone who should already understand. "Britt, you're more of a dreamer, and I love that about you. But tech isn't about dreaming. It's about execution, hard numbers, pressure, making decisions when millions are on the line." He turned to Amanda. "Amanda has that. She's got the instincts." "I have the instincts too." He gave a small smile. "You've got plenty of strength, sweetheart. They're just different. Not everybody is built for this." My mother didn't speak during any of this. She was looking at her plate. But her left hand, under the table, was gripping the edge of her chair so hard her knuckles were white. I saw it. I didn't understand it then. She said nothing. She sat at that table and let my father redraw the map of our family with Amanda at the center and me at the margins, and she didn't say a word. I spent years being angry at her for that. It took me much longer to understand that her silence wasn't agreement. It was survival. After dinner, I helped Mom clear the table. Amanda and Dad moved to the living room, already talking about Wharton contacts and board introductions. I washed dishes. Mom dried. We didn't speak for a long time. Then, very quietly, "Your app, the inventory one, I saw it on your laptop." "You did?" "It was impressive, Brittany. I want you to know that." I didn't know what to do with that. My mother had never said anything like it before. It felt like a secret being shared in code. "Don't stop building things." Then she set the dish towel down and walked into the living room where my father and Amanda were talking about the future of Walker Systems, the future that didn't include me. The next year was Thanksgiving. I was 18. The dining room expanded with a folding table for 12. Extended family, my father's business partner, Tom Feldman, and his wife, a couple of family friends. Noise everywhere. Football on television, overlapping conversations, kids in the yard. I was seated at the end of the folding table extension, not the main table, literally at the margins. 3 days earlier, I had received my acceptance to UC Berkeley, computer science, full scholarship. The letter was folded twice in my back pocket. I was going to tell everyone at the table. I wanted to see my father's face. He spoke first. He stood with his wine glass. "I want to say how proud I am this year. Amanda just finished her first semester at Wharton, top 10% of her class. She's interning at a consulting firm in Manhattan this January, and when she's ready, there's a seat at Walker Systems with her name on it." Tom Feldman looked down the table at me. "What about Brittany? She's the techie, right?" I sat up. This was my opening. My father laughed. "Brittany is our creative one. She's got great ideas. But Amanda is the one with real business sense. Every company needs both types, but only one gets to run the show." The room laughed, good-natured. They thought it was a compliment. My father was smiling. Amanda was smiling. Everyone was smiling except two people, me and my mother, standing in the kitchen doorway holding a casserole dish, completely still. I put the Berkeley letter back in my pocket. I didn't announce it. I ate in silence for the rest of the meal. I had won a full-ride scholarship to one of the best computer science programs in the country. And I said nothing, because I knew that whatever I said, my father would find a way to make it smaller. Berkeley is fine, but Amanda got into Wharton. Computer science is interesting, but business is where the real leaders come from. I could already hear it in his voice before he opened his mouth. So I kept mine shut, and that silence cost me something I didn't know I was losing. I showed the letter to my mother the next morning in the kitchen. She cried. Every family has a pattern. Ours was simple. At 15, I built a website for a local nonprofit. The director wrote a thank you letter to our family. Dad read it, said, "That was nice of you, Britt," and pinned Amanda's semester report card to the fridge. At 16, I won 3rd place at the Texas State High School Hackathon, coded a weather alert app in 36 hours. Dad was at a conference in Chicago. Mom sent him a photo. He texted back, "Good job," with a thumbs-up emoji. That same week, Amanda failed an accounting exam at Wharton. Dad flew to Philadelphia to take her to dinner and tell her one bad grade means nothing. At 17, I landed a summer internship at a tech startup in Austin. Told my father at breakfast. He said that was great, then asked if I could help Amanda with her Walker Systems onboarding presentations. I spent that summer working at the startup until 5, and editing Amanda's slides until midnight. Nobody asked how my internship was going. At 18, I called to tell my father about Berkeley. His response, "Berkeley, that's solid. Good school." Amanda got into Wharton, of course, but Berkeley has a good engineering program. Practical. Practical. Not "I'm proud of you." Not "you earned this." Just practical. As if the best thing about my achievement was that it was useful enough not to embarrass him. Amanda was the future. I was the footnote. And the worst part wasn't that my father believed it. The worst part was that, for a very long time, I believed it too. I left for Berkeley in August of 2015. I didn't ask my father to help me move. Mom drove me. We listened to the radio and didn't talk about Greg or Amanda for the entire 6-hour drive. When she dropped me off at the dorm, she held my face in both hands and said, "Show them what you can do." I threw myself into Berkeley. Dean's List every semester, 3 internships, 1 at a cybersecurity firm, 1 at a data analytics startup, 1 at a Fortune 500 company's research division. I published a paper on enterprise data architecture as a junior. My senior capstone project, an enterprise data optimization platform, was described by my thesis advisor, Professor Langston, as the most original work he had seen from an undergraduate in a decade. I graduated cum laude in June of 2019. 4 years of relentless work. 4 years of proving to myself, not my father, to myself, that I belonged in every room they said I didn't. And on the day I walked across that stage, the one person I still foolishly wanted to impress didn't bother showing up. He was in Austin, pitching a new project. Amanda's project. He didn't call until 9 that night. And when he did, he didn't ask what honors I received, what my GPA was, or what my professor said about my future. He talked about Amanda. He always talked about Amanda. I told you he didn't come. But I need you to understand what that day actually felt like. Because a fact and a feeling are two different things, and it was the feeling that broke me. Saturday, June 15th, 2019, graduation day. UC Berkeley's Greek Theater, the stone amphitheater carved into the hillside, thousands of seats rising in semicircles. California June sun, cloudless, warm, a light breeze carrying eucalyptus from the hills, the low roar of families, laughter, phones ringing, and pomp and circumstance playing through the sound system. That song you've heard 1,000 times, but still makes your throat tight when it's for you. I was in the processional line with 300 other computer science graduates. The girl next to me was excited. Family flew in from Michigan, 8 people. I smiled and said that was great. I had checked my phone 14 times since 7 that morning. No messages from my father. I had texted him the night before with the logistics. Ceremony starts at 10, Greek Theater, Section C. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. No, I'll be there. Just a thumb. I told myself that morning it didn't matter if he came. I had a degree, honors, 3 internship offers, and a capstone project my professor called exceptional. I didn't need him in that audience. I told myself that. I didn't believe it. The processional began. As I entered the amphitheater, I did what every graduate does. I scanned the crowd, thousands of faces, a blur of color and movement. I looked for row 5. 2 seats I had reserved weeks ago, one for Mom, one for Dad. I found Mom. Aisle seat. She was wearing a blue dress, the same one she wore to my high school graduation. She was holding her phone in one hand and a small handmade sign in the other. Block letters, hand-drawn star. That's my daughter. The seat next to her was empty. My eyes stayed on that chair for 3 full seconds as I walked. Somebody bumped me from behind. Keep moving. I turned forward, one empty chair in a sea of 8,000 people. That's all it was. And I felt it like a hole in the middle of my chest. I adjusted my cap. I kept walking. The ceremony went on. Dean's speech, faculty addresses. I half listened. I was watching Mom. She was filming on her phone, smiling, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty seat. Once she placed her purse on the chair, then took it off, as if catching herself saving a spot for someone who wasn't coming. My row was called. The announcer read my name, Brittany Ann Walker, Bachelor of Science, Computer Science, cum laude. I crossed the stage. The applause was general, not the roaring cheer some graduates got from their families. I heard Mom's voice thin and far away, shouting something I couldn't make out. Professor Langston was standing at the end of the stage, handing out diplomas. When I reached him, he shook my hand firmly and leaned close, over the microphone noise. You're going to change the industry, Brittany. I mean that. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I thanked him, held the diploma in both hands, looked out at the audience one more time. Mom was standing, clapping, tears running down her face. The sign was pressed against her chest. The empty chair was still empty. Professor Langston said I was going to change the industry. My mother made a sign with a hand-drawn star. And my father was in Austin, pitching a project to investors. Amanda's project. Not even his own. He had chosen for the final time to be somewhere else. And I felt something I hadn't felt before. Not sadness, not anger. Something quieter and more permanent. I felt done. I walked off the stage holding my diploma. I did not look at the empty chair again. After the ceremony, Mom found me on the plaza. She pushed through the crowd and wrapped both arms around me, her face pressed into my shoulder. She was shaking, crying hard. I could feel the sobs through the polyester gown. She smelled like the perfume she'd worn since I was a child, something floral and slightly powdery, comforting in a way that had everything to do with memory. She pulled back, held my face in both hands. "I am so proud of you. You have no idea how proud I am." "Thanks, Mom." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry he's not here. I asked him. I told him. It's okay. It's not okay." Silence between us. The plaza noise filled the gap. "Did he call this morning?" She didn't answer right away, looked down, adjusted the sign under her arm. "He said the investor meeting couldn't be moved. He said Amanda's presentation was today, and he needed to be there in person." I nodded slowly. Amanda's presentation, on my graduation day, he chose. She didn't say he sends his congratulations. She didn't say he feels terrible. And I noticed what she didn't say. She didn't defend him. First time in 22 years my mother didn't make an excuse for my father. Somehow that hurt more. Because if even she had stopped pretending, then it was really as bad as I thought. She asked a stranger to take a photo, me in my cap and gown, Mom in the blue dress, the sign held between us. We both smiled, real smiles but with a crack running through them that only we could see. That was the only photo from that day. No family portrait, no father-daughter shot, just two women in the sun. 6 years later, it sat on my desk in San Francisco, face down, because some days looking at it was too much. That evening I was back in Austin, sitting on the bed in my childhood bedroom, smaller than I remembered. Single bed, desk I used to code at, the old ThinkPad still on the shelf. Dusty, dark. Door closed, only the glow from my phone. Downstairs the television was on, my father's voice carrying through the floor. He had greeted me at the door with a one-arm hug. "Congratulations, kiddo." Then he went back to the living room. No questions about the ceremony, no asking to see the diploma. I sat on the bed and waited, maybe for him to come upstairs, to knock, to sit on the edge of the bed and say, "Tell me about today." 2 hours. He didn't come. At 9:14 my phone rang. He was calling from downstairs. He could have walked up the stairs and opened my door. He called from the couch. "Hey, Britt, how was the ceremony?" "It was good." "Good. Sorry I couldn't make it. The Meridian meeting was locked in for months and Amanda really needed me there for the pitch." "I understand." "But listen, it went great. Amanda knocked it out of the park. Meridian Group is seriously interested. This could be a game changer for Walker Systems." I said nothing. "Anyway, we should celebrate your graduation this week. Maybe dinner? I'll have Linda make a reservation." "Sure, Dad." "Oh, and I've been meaning to ask. Have you thought about what's next? Because if you're looking for work, I know a couple people in data entry and project management who might be able to..." Data entry. I had graduated cum laude from Berkeley's computer science program. I had built an enterprise data optimization platform that my thesis advisor called the most original undergraduate work in a decade. I had 3 job offers on my desk. And my father, who missed my graduation to pitch my sister's project, was offering to connect me with people in data entry. "That's okay, Dad. I've got some things lined up." "Oh, great. Well, let me know if you need anything." "I will." "Proud of you, kiddo." The line went dead. "Proud of you, kiddo." 4 words. Generic, weightless. The kind of thing you say to a neighbor's kid at a barbecue. He didn't ask what honors I received. He didn't ask about my capstone. He didn't ask what Professor Langston said. He offered data entry. And then he said he was proud the way you'd say, "drive safe." Automatically. Because it's what you're supposed to say on the way out. At 2 a.m, I opened a suitcase on my bed. The house was dark, everyone asleep. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the ticking of the hallway clock, my grandmother's antique. That ticking is the one sound I remember from that house. I packed calmly. Clothes, minimal, my laptop, the diploma in its cardboard tube, toothbrush, 2 chargers, 1 framed photo, the one of Mom and me wrapped in a t-shirt. The old ThinkPad stayed on the shelf. Everything else stayed. I zipped the suitcase. It closed easily. My entire life fit in a medium suitcase and a backpack. That should have felt sad. It felt light. I ran my hand along the desk where I coded my first app at 14. The wood was scratched where the ThinkPad used to sit. I traced the scratch with one finger, left it. I rolled the suitcase into the hallway. The wheels on carpet made almost no sound. I passed Amanda's old room, door open, empty. I passed the family photos on the wall. I didn't look at them. I reached the top of the stairs, and Mom was there. She was standing at the bottom. Robe, bare feet on the hardwood. Red eyes, but she wasn't crying now. She had been waiting. She knew. We looked at each other across the dark stairway. The clock ticked. "I heard you packing." "I'm sorry, Mom." She shook her head. "Don't be." I descended the stairs, set the suitcase by the front door, turned back to her. "You have money?" $600 from the internship. "That's not enough." "It's enough to start." She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, held me for a long time. Not the desperate clutching of someone trying to stop me. The steady, solid embrace of someone letting go on purpose. I could feel her breathing against my shoulder, controlled, measured, like she had rehearsed this too. While she held me, her right hand moved to the backpack hanging from my shoulder. She slid something into the front pocket. A small envelope. White, sealed, no name on the outside. I didn't feel it. I wouldn't find it for weeks. In a studio apartment in Oakland, when I was looking for a pen and discovered something my mother had hidden in my bag without me knowing. But I'll get to that. She held me at arm's length, looked at my face, memorizing. "Call me when you're ready, I'll be here." "I don't know when that will be." "I know." "I love you, Mom. I have always loved you, even when I was quiet, especially when I was quiet." I picked up the suitcase, put my hand on the front door handle, paused. I almost looked back up the stairs toward my father's closed bedroom door. Almost. I didn't. I opened the front door, stepped into the warm Texas night. June air, thick and humid, crickets, a distant car alarm. The streetlight at the end of the driveway threw a yellow cone of light across the concrete. I pulled the door closed behind me, gently, the way you close something you know you'll never open again. I walked down the driveway with my suitcase and my backpack and $600. I didn't have a car, I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have a plan beyond getting to the Greyhound station on Congress Avenue and buying a ticket to the first city that felt far enough away. I was 22 years old. I had a degree from Berkeley, honors my father hadn't asked about, and a capstone project nobody in my family had ever seen. I had a mother who loved me and a father who didn't know how. And I had a decision. Spend the rest of my life waiting for a man to see me, or go build something so big he couldn't look away. I chose building. Oakland, California. That's where the bus took me. $600. A suitcase. A backpack with an envelope I didn't know about yet. And the kind of anger that doesn't scream. It plans. I didn't speak to my father again for 6 years. He didn't call, he didn't write, he didn't look, and by the time he finally needed me, he wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. None of them would. Oakland, California, July 2019, 3 weeks after walking out of my father's house. I found a studio apartment on Craigslist, 400 square feet on MacArthur Boulevard. First month plus deposit ate $340 of my $600. A mattress on the floor, a folding table from Goodwill that doubled as my desk, one overhead bulb with no lampshade, my suitcase open against the wall because I didn't own a dresser. I was coding 16 hours a day, 8 for a web design shop in Emeryville that paid $12 an hour, 8 on my own project, the enterprise data optimization platform from my capstone at Berkeley. I believed it could be something. I just needed to make it real. One evening I was digging through my backpack looking for a USB drive. My hand found something in the front pocket I didn't remember putting there. A white envelope, sealed, no name. I sat on the mattress and tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper in my mother's handwriting. $400 in cash, crisp 20s that had been stored, not spent. And a business card. Cream-colored, simple, Rachel Simmons, angel investor, Simmons Capital Partners. A Palo Alto address. The letter was short. 5 sentences. Brittany, believe in yourself even when no one else does. This money is from my personal savings. Your father doesn't know about it. The card belongs to someone I trust. Call her when you're ready. I love you. Mom. I held the letter for a long time. Rachel Simmons, angel investor. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know how my mother, a homemaker in Austin, Texas, had the business card of an angel investor in Palo Alto. I didn't ask. I put the card in my wallet behind my driver's license and told myself I'd figure it out later. The $400 went into a Ziploc bag in the mini fridge behind the ramen. I didn't touch it for 5 months. 8 months later, I was sitting in my car in a parking garage in San Jose staring at the steering wheel. Pitch number 9. I had refined the deck each time. Tighter slides, cleaner projections, real metrics from a small deployment I'd done for a logistics company. The platform worked, none of it mattered. The investor, a man in his 50s, looked at my resume, my age, the fact that I had no co-founder and no Stanford network. The tech is interesting, but you're 23. No co-founder, no institutional backing. Come back in 5 years with traction and a team. It's not a student project, it's a working platform. He was already standing, hand extended. We appreciate you coming in. 7 minutes, my pitch was scheduled for 30. I sat in the car and cried. Not the polite kind, the ugly kind where your forehead presses against the steering wheel and your shoulders shake and you can't breathe. I let it all come. The 9 rejections, the 16-hour days, the mattress on the floor, the 4-second glance from my father, the empty chair, the data entry comment. All of it, in a parking garage where nobody knew my name. Then I stopped, wiped my face with a napkin from the glove compartment. Mascara ruined, eyes swollen. I didn't care. I reached into my wallet, pulled out the business card. Cream-colored, Rachel Simmons, angel investor. 9 people had told me no. 9 people had looked at my work and decided it wasn't enough. But there was one number I hadn't called. One person I'd been saving, the way you save the last match in a box, because if this one doesn't light, there's nothing left. 3 rings, a woman's voice, warm and direct. Rachel Simmons. Ms. Simmons, my name is Brittany. I'm a software engineer with an enterprise data platform, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to hear a 10-minute pitch. How did you get this number? Someone who trusts you gave it to me. A longer pause. Are you in the Bay Area? San Jose, right now. Can you be in Palo Alto tomorrow morning, 8 a.m.? There's a coffee shop called Verve on University Avenue. I'll be there. I hung up, sat in the car, heart pounding. Something opening inside me that was sharper than hope. The feeling of a door cracking 1 inch when every other door has been slammed. Verve Coffee Roasters, University Avenue, Palo Alto. 8 in the morning. I had arrived 40 minutes early. Corner table, laptop open, deck loaded, hands wrapped around a $4 drip coffee I was making last. Rachel Simmons arrived at exactly 8. Early 60s, silver hair cut short, charcoal blazer over a white tee, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She moved through the room like someone completely comfortable in every space she entered. Firm handshake, eye contact that didn't waver. She sat, didn't order coffee. You've got 10 minutes, go. I pitched. 9 rejections had burned the fear away. What was left was clarity. The platform, enterprise data optimization, connecting fragmented systems, reducing redundancy, cutting costs by 22% in pilot tests, the prototype, the testimonial, the projections. 8 minutes, laptop closed. Rachel hadn't moved. Now she stared at me. Long silence, the kind that makes you hear your own heartbeat. How old are you? 23. And you built this alone? Yes, ma'am. From scratch? From a capstone project I developed at Berkeley. I've been rebuilding it for commercial deployment since last July. She opened her leather notebook, wrote something, closed it. I've been waiting for someone like you. I froze. Not because she said yes. She hadn't yet. Because of the phrasing. I've been waiting, as if she already knew I was coming. Her eyes stayed on mine a beat too long, like she wasn't hearing a pitch but confirming something she already suspected. I thought it was just a figure of speech. It would be years before I understood what she really meant. She wrote a check right there at the table. tore it off, slid it across. I won't say the number. It was more than enough to incorporate, lease a small office, hire 2 engineers, and build the first commercial version. I have one condition. What? You don't use your last name in the company. Build it clean, no family connections, no shortcuts. I want to see what you can do with nothing but the work. I stared at her. I hadn't used the Walker name since Oakland, but the fact that she said it specifically, as a condition. I didn't question it then. Looking back, I realized she knew exactly whose daughter I was. She knew, and she was protecting me from it. Deal. We shook hands. Novatech Industries was born. 2.5 years later, September 2022, Novatech's first real office, a converted warehouse in Soma, San Francisco, exposed pipes, concrete floors, 12 employees, the Novatech logo on the wall, a clean N in steel gray and electric blue. It was the first thing I put up when we moved in. 27 months after Rachel's check, we landed our first Fortune 500 client, a global shipping company overhauling its data infrastructure across 11 countries. They evaluated 4 vendors. We were the smallest. We won. $3.8 million over 2 years. The contract that turned a startup into a company. It was 9 at night. The team had celebrated and gone home. Just me and Leah Chen, my head of operations, the woman who would become my COO. She was at her desk, still typing. I was standing in the hallway looking at the logo on the wall. You're still here? I'm looking at the logo. She turned and looked at it too. It's a good logo. 3 years ago, I was eating ramen in a studio apartment in Oakland, coding on a folding table. My father told me I didn't have what it takes for tech. Quiet beat. You've never mentioned your father before. I know. Leah was the closest thing I had to a partner. She had been with me since the seed round. She knew my coffee order, my work habits, my insomnia patterns. She did not know my last name was Walker. She did not know my father ran a tech company in Austin. She did not know I had a sister who had been handed everything I'd had to build from scratch. I had erased my family from my biography so completely that even the person who sat across from me 12 hours a day had no idea who I used to be. I stood in front of the logo, almost cried, felt it rising behind my eyes, the pressure of 3 years of work and silence and loneliness. But I held it. I had taught myself to hold it. Crying was for parking garages when nobody was watching. This was my office, my company, something new. I nodded at the logo, turned off the light, walked out. November 2024, Novatech headquarters. Not a converted warehouse anymore. A glass tower in the financial district. 42nd floor. 312 employees across 4 offices. The kind of building where the elevator requires a key card and the lobby has a waterfall wall. On my desk, Leah had left a printed TechCrunch article and a Forbes magazine with post-it notes. The headline, Novatech Industries hits $4.5 billion valuation after Series D. Forbes 30 under 30, technology category. My photo, professional, unsmiling, shot in my office with the Bay Bridge behind me. I read my own bio. Founder and CEO, Novatech Industries, UC Berkeley, computer science, former independent software engineer. No mention of family, no mention of Austin, no mention of Walker. The article called me self-made. I liked that word, self-made. As if I'd assembled myself in a lab, which, in a way, I had. I had taken the parts my father said were defective, the dreaming, the coding, the stubborn belief that I could build something, and I'd welded them into a company worth more than Walker Systems had ever been at its peak. I opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I searched Walker Systems, Austin, Texas. A brief article from the Austin Business Journal, 8 months old. Walker Systems reports 3rd consecutive year of revenue decline. Below it, a quote from Greg Walker. We remain confident in our strategic direction and the strength of our leadership team. 2 companies, 2 trajectories. 1 built by the daughter he believed in. 1 built by the daughter he didn't. He still didn't know. The tech world is vast enough that a CEO in San Francisco and a CEO in Austin can exist in entirely different orbits. I never used the name Walker in any public capacity. My LinkedIn said, Brittany, CEO, Novatech. My Forbes profile said the same, no middle name, no family section. I had deleted myself from his world so thoroughly that even when his company was dying and mine was thriving, we never intersected, not once in 6 years. Until last Tuesday. And then, on a Tuesday morning in March 2025, Leah walked into my office with an email from Walker Systems. 6 years. My father hadn't searched for me, hadn't Googled my name. He had let me disappear. And now he needed help. He just didn't know it was mine to give. I had turned the anger that doesn't scream into code, into contracts, into a company that employed 300 people on 4 continents. But here's the thing nobody tells you about proving someone wrong. You can build the tallest building in the city and still catch yourself looking down, checking if the person who doubted you is watching. He wasn't watching, he was drowning, and he was about to walk into my building and ask me to save him. I had spent 6 years building something from nothing. No family name, no shortcuts, no safety net, no phone calls on my birthday from Austin, no Thanksgiving invitations, no how are you, Brittany? Nothing. And now the man who said I didn't have what it takes for tech, the man who handed my sister the future and handed me silence, was about to walk into my building and beg. He thought he was pitching to a stranger. He was pitching to his daughter, the one he forgot. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep. By 5 in the morning, I was in the office. By 6, I had read the Walker Systems proposal 3 more times. By the time Leah arrived at 8:30, I had a list of every data point I needed and every question the proposal didn't answer. At 2 that afternoon, I called her in. Full due diligence on Walker Systems, financial audit, client retention, product lifecycle, leadership assessment, technical architecture of their flagship product. Everything. By tomorrow morning. Full due diligence on a company this size usually takes a week. You want it by morning? Pull 2 analysts from the Meridian Project. Her eyebrows rose. The Meridian Project is our biggest competitive analysis this quarter. I know what it is. She studied my face. There are 50 partnership proposals this quarter. Most are bigger than Walker Systems. Why is this one priority? I met her eyes, didn't blink. Call it instinct. She held the look for 2 seconds, the way she does when she knows I'm not telling her something but has decided not to push. Then she nodded, picked up her tablet, left. Leah could read a spreadsheet the way a cardiologist reads an EKG, catching arrhythmias other people missed. She could also read me. She knew I was lying. She knew something personal was buried in this decision. And she chose to trust me anyway. I didn't deserve that trust, not entirely. Because I was about to lead my company into a negotiation where I had the biggest conflict of interest imaginable, and I hadn't told a single person. I should have disclosed. Fiduciary duty, board responsibility, all the things I would fire someone else for hiding. I told myself I needed to see the data first. I told myself I hadn't decided anything. I told myself this was still just business. I knew I was lying. By evening, the building was mostly empty. I was working by desk lamp and screen glow, my ritual when deep in analysis. Leah's preliminary report was open, a shared document updating in real time. I watched the numbers populate like a diagnosis filling in. Walker Systems. Annual revenue peaked at $42 million in fiscal year 2021, currently $29 million, projected to drop below $25 by year-end. 4 major enterprise clients lost in 18 months. 2 to Meridian Tech. Cash reserves, $6.2 million. Monthly burn, $780,000. At that pace, roughly 8 months of runway. Headcount, 73 employees. Down from 104 at peak, 2 rounds of layoffs. Glassdoor reviews painted a company where morale had cratered. 73 people. That number kept coming back. 73 employees showing up every day to a company sinking under them. They didn't cause the decline. They didn't make the bad decisions. They just worked there. And if Walker Systems collapsed, every one of them would be looking for work in a market that wasn't kind to mid-career tech workers from a failed firm. I scrolled to leadership. Greg Walker, CEO. Founder-led, no succession plan. Management style described as top-down, resistant to outside input. Over-reliant on the founder's personal client relationships, which were aging out. Amanda Walker Ross, VP Operations. This is where I slowed down. Amanda assumed the role in 2020, the year after I left. She was tasked with 3 strategic initiatives: expand into healthcare data services, retain the top 5 enterprise clients, modernize the Syncor deployment pipeline. Healthcare expansion burned through $1.2 million in development costs, acquired 0 clients, shelved after 14 months. Client retention. Of the top 5, 3 left during Amanda's tenure. Exit interviews cited lack of technical innovation. Deployment modernization. Over budget by 60%, 11 months late. Integration bugs that directly caused 2 client departures. 3 initiatives, 3 failures, each with Amanda's name on the top line. The sister my father said had real business sense, the one he built his succession plan around. Reading this didn't feel good. It felt like reading the medical chart of a patient you knew a long time ago. You don't want them to be sick, but the numbers don't care what you want. Below Amanda's profile, Victor Hale, board member. Former CFO 2012 to 2022, then moved to a board seat, well-connected in Austin tech circles. Described as politically astute, known for aligning with whoever holds the most power within an organization. I flagged his name in my notes. Political animal. I noted him and moved on. I'd deal with Victor Hale later. Then I opened the Syncor section. Walker Systems' flagship product. Enterprise data optimization platform, integrating fragmented systems, reducing redundancy, improving efficiency. Built in 2019, initial architecture described as ahead of its time. No major updates since 2022. Competitors, especially Meridian Tech, had overtaken it. Nothing unusual. Then I opened the architecture diagram. The technical schematic showing how Syncor's core engine processed data, the node structure, the optimization pathways, the proprietary algorithm at the center. I stopped breathing. My hand moved to the trackpad and froze, my other hand curled into a fist on the desk. I knew this architecture. Not because I had studied Walker Systems. Not because I had seen it in any industry report. I knew it because I had drawn it. 4 years earlier, in a dorm room at Berkeley, on a whiteboard at 2 a.m, working on my capstone project. The node structure, the optimization pathways, the way the algorithm branched at the 3rd decision layer. It was mine. I told myself I was wrong. I was tired, 7 hours into the data, making connections that weren't there. Lots of platforms use similar architectures. But the 3rd decision layer, the branching pattern, the way the algorithm weighted prioritization over efficiency at the node level. That was my innovation. The part Professor Langston called the most original undergraduate work in a decade. I zoomed in. Metadata. Development date, Q3 2019, July through September. 3 months after I graduated. 3 months after I left Austin. 3 months after I walked out with a suitcase and a backpack and an envelope I hadn't opened yet. Where did they get this architecture? I said it aloud. Then I called Leah 2 floors down. The Syncor technical review, the architecture diagram. Just uploaded it. What about it? Where's the source documentation, original design files? Proprietary, developed in-house 2019, no external licensing, no credited designer. Why? A long pause. I want a full technical audit, deep code base review, file names, creation dates, everything. Can you get that before the meeting? That's tomorrow at 2. I know. I'll need access to their code base. Requesting it directly means tipping them off we're doing more than a standard review. Then do it after the meeting. Start the request tonight. I want it ready the moment I give the word. Brittany, what's going on? I'm not sure yet. Keep digging. I hung up, stared at the diagram. The pattern that looked like my handwriting, the algorithm that thought the way I think. I didn't tell Leah, not because I was sure, because I was afraid I was right. And if I was right, if my father had taken my capstone project, the one he never asked to see, and built his flagship product on it, Then everything I thought I knew about my family was worse than I imagined. I saved a screenshot, closed the laptop, sat in the dark. Wednesday morning. I stood in my apartment in front of the closet after a shower. Clean walls, minimal furniture, no family photos anywhere. A single orchid on the kitchen counter I watered every morning, my one ritual of tenderness. I chose what to wear the way every woman chooses before a meeting where she knows she'll be underestimated. Charcoal suit, dark gray, almost black. Tailored. White blouse. No jewelry except a stainless steel Tag Heuer. I bought myself the day Novatech crossed 1 billion. Hair pulled back, clean. The suit said, "I am not here to be liked. I am here to negotiate." I paused at the mirror. Met my own eyes. For a moment I saw the 14-year-old girl holding a laptop in a living room, waiting for her father to look up. Then I blinked, and the girl was gone. Novatech at 7. 7 hours before the meeting. The conference room was empty, cold from overnight air conditioning, morning light pale through the glass walls. Long table, 12 chairs, view of the bay. I sat at the head. My chair, palms flat on the cool wood, looked at the 11 empty chairs around the table. In 7 hours, my father would sit in one of them, my sister in another, Victor Hale in a third. I didn't rehearse words, I rehearsed stillness, the ability to sit across from my father and not react, not flinch, not cry. The ability to look at the man who told me I wasn't good enough and hold his gaze with the calm of someone who knows exactly what she's worth. I thought about the empty chair at my graduation. Row 5, the chair he was supposed to sit in. And now I was at the head of the table in a building that bore my company's name, and he was coming to me. I didn't design the symmetry. Life did. The morning crawled. I reviewed the due diligence report again. Took a conference call with general counsel, 45 minutes, didn't remember a word. Ate half a salad at noon, threw the rest away. 1:30. I moved to my office, stood at the window, watched the clock, 1:35, 1:40, 1:45. There is a particular kind of waiting that exists only when you know something is about to change everything. Not patience, not anticipation. The suspended second between the lightning and the thunder, when you've seen the flash but haven't heard the sound, and you're counting. 1:47, Leah's voice through the intercom. Calm, professional, with a slight edge. "Brittany, they're here. 3 people checked in at the lobby. Greg Walker, Amanda Walker-Ross, and Victor Hale. They're coming up." I didn't move from the window. Watched my own reflection in the glass. Dark-suited, motionless. "Conference room ready?" "Since this morning. Water, screen, notepads. Your chair at the head." "Give them 5 minutes to settle, then come get me." "Understood." 5 minutes. I used them, fingertips against the glass. Cool, solid, real. 3 slow breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The technique a therapist taught me for moments when the past bleeds into the present. I thought about the envelope, Mom's letter, $400, the business card. Believe in yourself even when no one else does. I thought about pitch number 9, the parking garage, the tears on the steering wheel, the last match in the box. Rachel's voice in the coffee shop, "I've been waiting for someone like you." The Novatech logo on the warehouse wall, 12 employees. The architecture diagram from last night, the one that looked like my handwriting. Then I stopped thinking, because Leah was at the door. "They're ready." I turned from the window, adjusted my cuffs, one small nod. "Send them in." I walked toward the conference room, heels on polished concrete, each step deliberate. I could hear voices on the other side of the glass wall, muffled and polite, the small talk of people who don't know they're about to have the most important meeting of their lives. I put my hand on the door handle, opened it. And there he was. My father, standing at the far end of the table. Older than I remembered. Thinner. The jawline still hard, but the skin looser. The way men age when stress eats them from the inside. His hair had gone fully gray. It was still dark the last time I saw him, in the living room of 14 Maple Drive, not looking at my laptop. He was wearing a navy suit and a burgundy tie. The same tie. I recognized it, the one he wore to board meetings when I was a kid, the one he'd straighten in the hallway mirror while I watched from the stairs. The tie that meant important things were happening. He thought this was an important meeting. He had no idea how important. He looked right at me, smiled politely, the professional smile, the one for strangers, extended his hand. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice. I'm Greg Walker." He had no idea. I smelled him before I saw his face. The cologne. Same brand, same scent from 14 Maple Drive, the one that lingered in the hallway every morning after he left for work. I hadn't smelled it in 6 years, and my body recognized it before my brain did. Something tightened in my chest like a hand closing around a nerve. 3 people stood at the far end of the conference table. Greg Walker, navy suit, burgundy tie, the same tie. Thinner than I remembered, older, but projecting the confidence of a man who had been closing deals for 30 years. He extended his hand. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice. I'm Greg Walker, CEO of Walker Systems. This is Amanda Walker-Ross, our VP of Operations, and Victor Hale, Senior Board Member." I took his hand. The skin was rougher than I remembered. The grip was the same, strong, assertive, the grip that used to hold my hand crossing parking lots when I was 6. I knew the callus on his right thumb. I knew the way his fingers closed, firm, then release, then gone. I had held that hand 1,000 times before I learned it would never reach for mine first. Now it was shaking mine across a conference table, and he had no idea whose hand he was holding. "Welcome to Novatech, please have a seat." Amanda stepped forward. Cream blazer, hair blown out, the polished presentation I remembered from every family gathering. She always looked the part. Her handshake was lighter than Greg's, quicker, but as she took my hand, her eyes did something. They lingered. 1 second longer than standard. Her gaze flicked across my face, the jawline, the crease between my eyebrows that every walker has, and something in her expression shifted. A micro-twitch, a flicker of almost recognition, and then it was gone. She smiled, sat down, sat. She almost saw me. For 1 second her brain tried to connect the woman in front of her to the girl she'd called a cute hobby 14 years ago, but the connection didn't fire. Amanda had never really looked at me. She saw a CEO in a charcoal suit. She didn't see her sister. The disguise wasn't my clothes or my title. The disguise was her own indifference. Victor Hale shook my hand with the over-firm grip of a man who compensates with force. Silver cufflinks, eyes that assessed the room before they assessed the people. He said nothing beyond pleasure. Everyone sat, me at the head, Greg to my left, Amanda across from him, Victor at the far end, Leah behind me, tablet ready. Greg stood to present. He had a slide deck projected onto the screen. Clean design, blue tones, the Walker Systems logo prominent. He spoke with the voice I knew, the confident one, the boardroom one, the one he used at dinner tables when he talked about Amanda's future. He pitched Walker Systems' strategic value, 30 years in enterprise data, established client base, proprietary technology, experienced leadership. He emphasized partnership synergies between Walker Systems' legacy market position and Novatech's innovation platform. He was good. He had the cadence, the pauses, the eye contact. He made Walker Systems sound like a company in transition, not a company in freefall. He said strategic repositioning when he meant losing clients. He said leadership depth when he meant his daughter, who had failed 3 consecutive projects, was his only succession plan. He said proprietary technology when he meant Syncor, the architecture I was now almost certain had been built on my capstone. I sat perfectly still, took notes on a legal pad, didn't look up when he made his strongest claims. Greg turned the floor to Amanda. She stood, smoothed her blazer, cleared her throat. The operations overview, streamlined workflows, optimized delivery pipelines, client-centric restructuring. Amanda spoke the way my father taught her to speak. In abstractions, confident phrasing, no specifics. She said optimized delivery pipelines without mentioning the 11-month delay. She said client-centric restructuring without mentioning that 3 of their top 5 clients were gone. She spoke the way people speak when they've been told their whole life that sounding confident is the same as being competent. She sounded exactly like Dad, and for the first time, that didn't make me angry. It made me sad. I hadn't expected that. Instead of vindication, I saw a woman performing a role she was cast in, not one she chose. Victor added brief comments: strategic value, market positioning. His contribution was short and calculated. He wasn't pitching. He was watching me, reading my reactions the way a poker player watches for tells. The presentation ended. Greg clicked to the final slide. Partnership proposal, next steps. He sat down, clasped his hands on the table, looked at me with the expectant, slightly vulnerable expression of a man who had just asked for something he desperately needed. The room went quiet. I didn't speak. I let the silence hold. 5 seconds. 10. Long enough for Greg to shift in his chair. Long enough for Amanda to glance at Victor. I let them wait because I needed the time. I needed to decide exactly who I was going to be in the next 30 seconds. I pushed my chair back, stood slowly, buttoned the top button of my suit jacket, the gesture anyone in boardrooms recognizes, the signal that something formal is about to happen. I walked to the window, stood with my back to the skyline, afternoon light framing my silhouette. I was standing, they were sitting. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Walker. It was thorough. I looked at Greg, then Amanda, then Victor, back to Greg. Your company has significant challenges. The revenue decline, the client attrition, the leadership gaps. These are not minor issues, and a partnership of this nature would require extraordinary transparency from both sides. Greg nodded. We're prepared for full transparency. Good, because before we proceed I need to disclose something, in the interest of that transparency. The room stiffened. Leah looked up from her tablet. Victor's hand stopped moving on his notepad. Amanda's eyes narrowed, the instinct of someone who senses danger before she understands it. When I was growing up, there was a house on Maple Drive in Austin, Texas. Number 14, big yard, leather couch in the living room. A hallway clock that ticked so loud you could hear it from the second floor. Greg's expression changed, not recognition, confusion. Why was this woman talking about a house in Austin? There was a girl who lived in that house. She taught herself to code on a second-hand laptop she bought for $40. She built an inventory management app when she was 14 and tried to show it to her father. He looked at it for 4 seconds and went back to his phone call. Greg's mouth opened slightly. His hand resting on the table went still. That girl won a hackathon in high school, got into Berkeley, graduated cum laude, and on the day she crossed that stage, her father was in Austin pitching a project. He didn't come. He didn't even ask what honors she received. Amanda's face went white. The pen she was holding slipped from her fingers and rolled across the table. Nobody picked it up. I looked directly at Greg, eye to eye, 6 years of distance compressed into 3 feet of conference room air. My full name is Brittany Ann Walker. I grew up at 14 Maple Drive, Austin, Texas. 1 beat, 2. And you, Mr. Walker, are my father. The room didn't explode. It imploded. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I have ever heard. The hum of the HVAC, suddenly deafening. The tick of my watch. A car horn 42 floors below, faint and absurd. Greg's breathing, audible now, shallow and rapid. His face collapsed in 3 stages. First, confusion. His brain rejecting the information. Brittany was a girl in a bedroom in Austin. Brittany was a name he hadn't said out loud in years. Brittany was not a woman in a charcoal suit standing in a glass office overlooking the bay. Second, recognition, the jawline, the crease between the eyebrows, the way I stood with my weight on my left foot, the same way I stood in the living room holding a laptop at 14. Third, something that looked like the ground opening under his feet. Brittany? Barely above a whisper. A pause that lasted a decade. That's not possible. And yet here I am. His hands were shaking. I saw the tremor in his fingers as they gripped the edge of the table. The same table I chose, the same chair I placed him in. He looked at me the way you look at something you broke a long time ago and forgot about. And then one day you find it whole, polished, worth more than everything else you own. And you realize the breaking was never the object's flaw. It was yours. Amanda recovered first. She always was faster at adapting. Her voice, when it came, was controlled but strained like a wire pulled too tight. "Wait, you're telling me you're the CEO, you run this company?" "Founded it, built it, yes." A short, strange laugh, not humor, something else. "Novatech, $4.5 billion. And you're... you." There it was. You're you. 2 words that carried 32 years of assumptions. Amanda couldn't reconcile the girl she called cute hobby with the woman who built a company worth more than Walker Systems had ever been. Not because the evidence wasn't in front of her, because the category didn't exist in her mind. I was the footnote, the dreamer. I wasn't supposed to be the CEO. But underneath the shock, I caught something else in Amanda's eyes. Not awe, not admiration, something colder, calculating. The look of someone rapidly recalculating a chessboard. Not to congratulate the opponent, but to find a new angle of attack. Just a flash, gone as fast as it came. But I'd spent 6 years reading boardrooms. I knew what calculation looked like when it wore a human face. Amanda wasn't just shocked, she was threatened, and threatened people do dangerous things. Victor Hale had said nothing since the reveal. He leaned back, arms crossed, watching the scene with the detached precision of a man already figuring out which side to be on. His eyes moved between Greg, Amanda, and me, triangulating, measuring. He caught me looking at him. For 1 second our eyes met. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not respect, exactly. Acknowledgement. One power player recognizing another. Greg opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Brittany, He stopped. "How long have you—" "6 years since I left." "And you built all of this?" "Yes." His voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you call?" "You know why." That line landed. Greg flinched, physically, visibly, the way you flinch when someone says out loud the thing you've been trying not to think. I didn't press. I let it sit. I wasn't here to destroy him. Not today. Today was the reveal. The reckoning would come later. "I think we should table the partnership discussion for now. My team has additional due diligence to complete. We can reconvene next week." "Brittany, please." "Ms. Chen will show you out." I nodded at Leah. She stood. Professional, gestured toward the door. Amanda gathered her things quickly, too quickly, shoving her portfolio into her bag with hands that weren't as steady as her face. Victor stood smoothly, buttoned his jacket. Greg was the last to rise. He stood slowly, like a man whose legs weren't certain of the floor. He paused at the door, turned back. Amanda and Victor were already in the hallway. It was just Greg and me and the long table between us. He looked at me. Not the professional look from the handshake, not the confused look from the reveal, something raw, unprotected. The face of a man standing in the rubble of something he only now realized he'd destroyed. He opened his mouth and he said something. Not an excuse, not a defense, not "let's talk about the partnership," not "I'm sorry," not any of the things I had rehearsed responses for. He said something I didn't expect, something that cracked the armor I'd spent 6 years building, something that changed everything that came after. But I'll get to that. The door closed, and I stood alone in that conference room, in the room I built, in the company I built, in the city I'd chosen, with his words still in the air and my hands shaking for the first time in 6 years. I need to go back to the moment in the doorway. The thing my father said that I withheld from you. Because what happened next, the thing I discovered about my own code, none of it makes sense without understanding 3 words my father said while standing in my doorway. Greg was at the conference room door, one hand on the frame, his face raw, unprotected, the rubble of something he only now realized he'd destroyed. He looked at me across the length of the table. His voice was quiet, stripped of the boardroom confidence, almost unrecognizable. "I looked for you." 4 words, not "I'm sorry," not "how could you do this to us," not "can we discuss the deal." 4 words I did not have a rehearsed response for. "After you left. I looked for you. I called Berkeley. They said you'd graduated and left no forwarding address. I searched online, but there was no Brittany Walker in tech, no social media, nothing." His voice cracked. "I thought maybe something had happened to you." My jaw tightened. My right hand pressed flat against the table. My left hand curled into a fist beneath the table where he couldn't see. He said he looked for me. And the thing that made my hands shake wasn't that he said it. It was that I wanted to believe him. After everything, after 6 years, some part of me wanted those 4 words to be true. Silence held for several seconds. You looked for me. Yes. But you didn't find me. No. Because I didn't want to be found. Because there was nothing left to find. Brittany. It's been 6 years, Dad. 6 years. You didn't come to my graduation. You offered me data entry contacts. You spent every dinner, every holiday, every conversation telling me I wasn't the one with talent. And then I left. And you want me to believe you looked? He said nothing. His hand dropped from the doorframe. I don't know if you looked. And right now, I don't know if it matters. He tried to redirect, the survival instinct of a businessman drowning personally and professionally. Can we at least discuss the partnership, separate from this? There is no partnership, not yet. My team has additional due diligence to complete. We can talk next week. Brittany, please, Walker Systems can't wait. Then you should have thought about that before you spent 30 years telling your daughter she wasn't good enough to run a tech company. The sentence landed like a closed door. He stared at me, opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once, small, defeated, and walked out. The door clicked shut. I sat down, placed both hands flat on the table, felt the tremor in my fingers. I looked for you. 3 words I couldn't verify and couldn't dismiss. 3 words that sat in my chest like a stone, too heavy to carry, too sharp to put down. I sat in that conference room for 45 minutes after he left. Didn't check my phone, didn't call Leah. The woman who built Novatech didn't sit in dark rooms feeling things. She made decisions. She moved forward. But that woman had just watched her father's face collapse, and she needed a minute, maybe 45 of them. Then I thought about the architecture diagram, the Syncor node structure that looked like my handwriting. Before I could figure out whether my father was telling the truth about looking for me, I needed to figure out whether he'd stolen my code. I picked up my phone, called Leah. The technical audit I requested last night, the Syncor deep dive, how fast can you execute? I already started the paperwork. We can formally request codebase access tomorrow morning under the due diligence clause. Do it first thing. I want the full source code analysis by Friday. Pause. Brittany, what happened in there after they left? Nothing I can talk about yet. Okay, Friday, you'll have it. I walked to the window, put my palm against the cold glass, looked out at the city I chose, the city that let me become someone new. I had 2 questions now. Did my father look for me? And did my father steal from me? I was terrified that the answer to the first was yes, and the answer to the second was also yes. Because that would mean the man who missed me was the same man who used me. And I didn't know how to hold both of those things at the same time. Thursday. Walker Systems codebase was delivered via secure transfer that morning. 52,000 lines of code. The core architecture of Syncor, the product that had generated the majority of Walker Systems' revenue for 5 years. Leah's team began the analysis immediately. Code quality assessment, security audit, licensing verification, and at my specific request, a source file metadata review, creation dates, file names, author tags, change logs, everything. I didn't tell Leah why I wanted the metadata. I didn't need to. She'd seen the way I froze at the architecture diagram 2 nights ago. She was smart enough to know something was buried in that code. She just didn't know what. Thursday passed slowly. I attended 2 other meetings and remember nothing about either. My mind was in the server room on the 38th floor. At 4 in the afternoon, Leah texted, "Preliminary scan done. Full analysis tomorrow morning, something you should see." I walked down to Leah's floor. She was standing at her whiteboard. Her lead analyst, Priya, was at her screen, not looking at anyone. The posture of someone who had found something they didn't want to be the one to explain. Leah's face was serious. Not panicked, serious. The expression she wore when she had bad news that was also complicated. We ran the metadata scan on the core Syncor files. The original architecture, the foundation everything else is built on, was created from a single source directory. And The directory was imported into Walker Systems' development environment in August 2019. It wasn't built internally, it was brought in from an external source. What was the directory name? Leah turned her screen toward me. On the screen in plain text, the root directory name of SyncCore's core architecture. BW_thesis_modified. BW Brittany Walker. Friday morning, Leah delivered the complete technical analysis in person. Walked into my office, closed the door, set a printed report on the desk, 12 pages. The full analysis is done. I need to walk you through this. She sat, opened the report. I read along. SyncCore's core architecture was built on a foundation imported from an external directory in August 2019. The directory was labeled BW_thesis_modified. No author tag was changed. Whoever imported the code didn't bother renaming the source. The core algorithm, the optimization engine, the node structure, the third decision layer branching pattern, matches 87% of the code in my UC Berkeley capstone project, submitted June 2019. The remaining 13% consists of surface-level modifications, variable renaming, UI wrapper, deployment framework. The intellectual foundation, the architecture, the logic, the innovation is mine. Walker Systems filed no patent on SyncCore. No open-source license was referenced. No author credit exists anywhere in the codebase beyond the directory name. Leah set down the report, looked at me. BW, those are your initials. I didn't answer. Brittany, is this your code? I stared at my screen, 2 windows side by side, left, SyncCore, right, my capstone. The side-by-side comparison was not subtle, not coincidental, line by line, function by function, architecture by architecture identical. Yes, she exhaled slowly. How did Walker Systems get your capstone project? I didn't know. I had theories. Maybe Greg accessed my Berkeley cloud repository after I left. The family shared account I never deleted. Or maybe a copy was on the old ThinkPad I left behind in my childhood bedroom. Or maybe Professor Langston shared the project through academic channels. It didn't matter how he got it. What mattered was this. My father told me I didn't have what it takes for tech. He said I was a dreamer. And then he took the code I wrote, the code he never asked about, and he built his company's flagship product on it. SyncCore. The product that kept Walker Systems alive for 5 years. The product that was now failing because nobody there understood how to update it. Because the only person who understood the architecture was the daughter they'd thrown away. I closed the laptop. Not a slam. A slow, deliberate closing, the way I'd closed the front door at 14 Maple Drive. I placed both hands on the closed laptop, pressed down, as if holding something shut. There are different kinds of betrayal. There's the kind that screams, the affair, the lie, the stolen money. And then there's the kind that's so quiet you don't hear it until years later, when you're sitting in an office you built with your own hands, and you discover that the man who said you weren't good enough was making money off your work the entire time. He didn't just dismiss my talent, he used it. He built his fortune on the back of a girl he couldn't be bothered to watch graduate, and he never told anyone where the code came from. Not the board, not the clients, not Amanda, not me. I turned my chair to the window, looked out. The bay, the bridge, the city, everything I built starting from $600 and a bus ticket. I had left that house with nothing, and now I knew he had kept the one thing I'd left behind that was worth something. Not a family photo, not a letter, my code, my work, my mind. Leah, still in the room, asked quietly, "What do you want to do?" I don't know. First time in 6 years I'd said those words. I'd always known. I'd always had a plan. In the parking garage, I had Rachel's card. In the conference room, I had the reveal. But here, I didn't know. Because the betrayal was too deep for strategy. It required something I hadn't allowed myself in 6 years. Grief. If we go public with this, Walker Systems doesn't just lose the partnership. They face IP theft litigation. The company is done, immediately. 73 people. 73 people who don't know their jobs are funded by stolen code. I know. Leah left. I sat alone. The city outside was bright and indifferent. He didn't just overlook me. He stole from me. He built his company's flagship product on my capstone project. the work of a 22-year-old girl who coded it in a dorm room at Berkeley, who showed it to a professor who called it the most original thesis he'd seen in a decade, who carried it to a graduation ceremony where her father didn't bother to show up. SyncCore. 4 years of revenue, millions of dollars, dozens of enterprise clients, all built on a foundation that came from a directory called BW_thesis_modified. BW, my initials, in his system, making him money, for 5 years. And the worst part, the part that kept me sitting in that dark office long after everyone else went home, wasn't the theft. The theft I could fight. I had lawyers. I had evidence. I had a company worth 80 times what his was worth. The worst part was that he'd said, "I looked for you." And some stupid, stubborn 14-year-old part of me still wanted that to be true, even now, even after this. And I hated myself for it. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the original capstone file, and read the dedication page I'd written 6 years ago at Berkeley. It said, "For my mother, who always believed, and for my father, who I hope someday will." I closed the laptop again. Someday hadn't come, and now I wasn't sure it ever would. Monday morning. The weekend had passed. I ran 6 miles Saturday, worked 12 hours Saturday afternoon, ran another 6 Sunday, and spent Sunday night staring at the ceiling the same way I stared at the ceiling in Oakland the night before everything began. I sat at my desk with a legal pad divided into 3 columns: stolen code options, partnership options, family options. None had answers. Leah walked in at 8:15 carrying 2 coffees. Her tell. When Leah brings coffee she didn't ask for, it means she has something to say. She sat across from me, didn't open her tablet, just eye contact. "We need to talk, not about the code, not about the deal, about you." "You told me to call it instinct. When I asked why Walker Systems was priority, you lied to me." "I know. Greg Walker is your father. Amanda is your sister. The code in SyncCore is yours. And you didn't tell me any of this before we started due diligence." "What do you want me to say, Leah?" "I want you to say why. We've worked together for 4 years. I've had your back through every crisis, every board fight, every late night. And you didn't trust me with this." This was the first time anyone had called me out on my secrecy, not as a professional failure, as a personal betrayal. Leah wasn't angry about the conflict of interest. She was hurt about the lie. Because the moment I told you, it would become real, and I wasn't ready for it to be real. She nodded slowly. Understood. Not agreed, but understood. This was the dynamic that made us work. Leah pushed. I resisted. And somewhere in the middle, we found the truth. She shifted to strategy mode. The code, 3 options. 1. Go public, file IP theft claim. Walker Systems collapses. 73 people lose jobs. Your father faces criminal charges. No. 2. Bury it, proceed as if we don't know. Dishonest, puts Novatech at legal risk. 3. Hold the evidence, don't go public, don't bury it, keep it as an asset we play only if we need to on our terms. This was why I trusted her. Leah mapped the terrain and let me navigate. 3. For now. For now. But Brittany, the board is going to ask questions soon, and I can't protect you from questions I don't have answers to. Amanda called Monday afternoon. She wanted dinner, just the 2 of us, no lawyers, no spreadsheets. Her tone was warm, sisterly, a tone I couldn't remember Amanda ever using with me. Amanda had never in my life asked me to dinner. Not for my birthday, not before Berkeley, not in 6 years. And now, 1 week after discovering her little sister was worth $4.5 billion, she wanted to be family. I said yes. Not because I believed her, because I wanted to see what she wanted. Tuesday evening, Zuni Cafe, Market Street. I arrived first, sat facing the door. Amanda arrived at 7:12, 12 minutes late, fresh blowout, red lipstick, cashmere sweater that cost more than my first month's rent in Oakland. Performing casual elegance. We ordered. Wine for Amanda, water for me. I don't drink when I need to stay sharp. Small talk, forced, fragile. Then she put down her glass. Dad's been a wreck since the meeting. He barely sleeps. He called me at 3 in the morning Thursday night and just talked about you, about when we were kids, about things I didn't even know he remembered. What things? The hackathon, the app you built when you were 14. He said he remembers you standing in the living room holding a laptop. My jaw tightened. He remembers, and he still turned away. He's a mess, Brittany. He knows he failed you. He doesn't know how to fix it. That's not why you're here. Slight flinch. What do you mean? You didn't call me for dinner to tell me Dad feels bad. You could have texted that. You're here because Walker Systems is dying and you need me to save it. You want me to sign the partnership. I want you to help us. That's what family does. Family. You didn't use that word when Dad said I'd never make it in tech. You didn't use it at Thanksgiving when he announced you were the future and I was the footnote. You didn't use it once in 6 years. We were kids. People say things. He wasn't a kid, Amanda. He was a father. And you had plenty of time to say something. You never did. Amanda's face hardened. The warm, sisterly mask slipped. Not all the way, but enough. Her voice dropped, the warmth replaced by something sharp. What do you want from me, Brittany? An apology? A trophy? You want me to say you were right and everyone else was wrong? Fine, you were right. You built a bigger company than Dad ever did. You're smarter than all of us. Congratulations. Is that enough? Can we move on now? I don't want a trophy. I want the truth about everything. Amanda's eyes flashed. The word everything landed differently. I was probing, seeing if she knew about the code. Her reaction, a microbeat of stillness, then deflection. The truth is that Dad is 60 years old, and his company is going to die without help. The truth is that you're the only person who can fix this, and you're making it about the past instead of the future. She didn't address everything. She redirected to the business case, the way Greg would. During the rest of dinner, I noticed something. Amanda checked her phone under the table 4 times. Each time she typed a quick response, her expression tightening before resettling into the casual mask. I didn't comment, I filed it. The dinner wound down. Amanda tried once more, reaching across to touch my wrist. Just think about it, please. Not for Dad. For the people who work there. I looked at the hand on my wrist, the same hand that waved dismissively at a laptop screen 14 years ago. I'll think about it. Amanda left first. I sat for another 5 minutes thinking. Something about that dinner was wrong. Not what Amanda said. What she didn't say. She came to convince me to save Walker Systems, but she never once asked about the partnership terms. She never asked what the deal structure would look like, what Novatech would want in return, what would happen to her title or her position. A VP whose company is being acquired doesn't show up to dinner without those questions. Unless she already knows the deal won't happen. Unless she's already working on an alternative. Something about that dinner was wrong. Not what Amanda said, what she didn't say. She came to convince me to save Walker Systems, but she never once asked about the partnership terms. She never asked what the deal structure would look like, what Novatech would want in return, what would happen to her title or her position. A VP whose company is being acquired doesn't show up to dinner without those questions, unless she already knows the deal won't happen, unless she's already working on an alternative. Wednesday morning, I was called into an informal check-in with 2 board members, Helen Park, lead independent director, former CFO of a Fortune 500, sharp and no-nonsense, and David Reeves, investor representative, Rachel Simmons's designee on the board. Helen led. Brittany, we've noticed significant resource allocation toward Walker Systems. 3 analysts reassigned from the Meridian Competitive Analysis. Full technical audit. In-person meeting with their entire leadership team. For a company valued at 1/60th of our market cap. I believe there's strategic value in their client base and certain technology elements. We've reviewed the preliminary numbers. Walker Systems is in terminal decline. Revenue down 31%. 8 months of runway. VP of Operations with a 0 for 3 track record. Help me understand the strategic case. I held my composure. I couldn't disclose the family connection. Not yet. Not without legal counsel. I couldn't mention the stolen code. I gave a sanitized answer about enterprise data infrastructure and client transition opportunities. Helen wasn't convinced but gave me runway. David Reeves said nothing, watched with an expression I couldn't read. He worked for Rachel. Rachel knew the truth. Whether David did was a question I couldn't answer. The board was right to question me. I was doing exactly what a CEO should never do, making a business decision driven by personal emotion. I knew it, Leah knew it, and now Helen Park was circling it like a hawk. The clock was ticking. I either needed to make a real business case for Walker Systems or walk away entirely. Wednesday evening. I was at my desk reviewing the timeline when Leah walked in. No knock, no coffee, holding her tablet with the screen dark. Her face had the expression I'd only seen twice in 4 years, the expression that means something is very wrong. I found something and you need to hear it now. She sat, showed me intercepted data from Novatech's competitive intelligence system, which monitors encrypted communication patterns between companies in our sector. Starting the day after our meeting with Walker Systems, there's been a spike in encrypted communications between someone inside Walker Systems and Meridian Tech. Meridian, our biggest competitor, the company that's already taken 2 of Walker's clients. Someone inside Walker is feeding them information about our deal discussions, pricing strategy, due diligence timeline, meeting notes. How much do they have? Enough to build a counteroffer. If Meridian approaches Walker Systems with a competing acquisition bid, they'll have enough intel to undercut anything we propose. I stared at the data. Someone inside Walker Systems was sabotaging the Novatech deal by selling information to the enemy. Can you identify the source? Not yet. The communications are VPN routed, but the metadata gives us a device signature. We'll have a match by Thursday. 3 crises, 3 fronts, the stolen code I was holding, the board questioning my judgment, and now a mole inside Walker Systems trying to kill the deal. Someone didn't want this partnership to happen. Someone inside my father's own company was feeding our strategy to our biggest competitor. And sitting in that office, replaying dinner with Amanda, the warmth that felt rehearsed, the phone she kept checking, the questions she never asked about deal terms, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I stood in my kitchen at 11 that night, replayed the dinner frame by frame. Amanda's phone under the table, 4 checks, the tightening expression, the fact that she never asked about terms, structure, her own role. A VP whose company is being acquired asks about terms, unless she knows the deal won't happen, unless she's building an alternative. Amanda's question, what do you want, Brittany? A trophy? Not a sister reconnecting. A negotiator testing what the other side will accept. Amanda's touch on the wrist. Just think about it. A stall. Keep Brittany from acting. Buy time. Amanda came to that dinner not to reconcile. She came to distract. To hold me in place while someone somewhere was sending our deal strategy to the one company that could use it against us. I didn't have proof. Leah would have the device match by Thursday. But I didn't need proof to know. I could feel it the way I'd felt every dismissal in that house. The sick, familiar certainty that someone in my family was working against me. Again. I picked up my phone, started to dial Greg's number, stopped. I didn't call my father, because I didn't know which conversation to have first. The one about the code he stole or the one about the daughter who might be selling us both out. Someone was sabotaging us. Someone inside my father's company was feeding confidential information to our biggest competitor. Everything Meridian needed to build a counteroffer that would blow ours out of the water. The board was questioning my judgment. The stolen code was a loaded gun I hadn't decided whether to fire, and now this. I thought about Amanda, the wine she ordered, the phone she kept checking, the questions she didn't ask, the hand on my wrist. Just think about it, please. And I had a sinking feeling I already knew who was trying to kill this deal. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Thursday morning, 7:15. Leah had been at her desk since 6. I walked in on 3 hours of sleep. She didn't ask. She could see it. She turned her screen toward me, metadata analysis, device signatures. The encrypted communications to Meridian Tech matched against Walker Systems' registered corporate devices. The VPN masked the IP, but the device fingerprint is unique. Every Apple device has one. The encrypted communications were sent from an iPad Pro registered to Walker Systems' corporate account. She paused. The device is assigned to Amanda Walker Ross. I didn't flinch. That was the worst part. I had known since Wednesday night, since the kitchen, since I counted the phone checks and the questions Amanda didn't ask at dinner. But knowing in your gut and seeing it on a screen are different things. The gut can be wrong. The gut can be paranoid, bitter, unfair. The screen doesn't lie. My sister had sat across from me at a restaurant, touched my wrist, said the word family, and then gone home and sent our deal strategy to Meridian Tech. Leah continued. The communications didn't go directly to Meridian. There was a relay, a second device that forwarded the encrypted packages. Victor Hale. His home laptop. He cleaned the metadata and forwarded everything to Meridian's VP of Corporate Development, the same exec who led the acquisition of 2 of Walker's former clients. Amanda and Victor had built a pipeline. She collected the intelligence from inside, meeting details, pricing strategy, timeline. He delivered it to the one company positioned to make a competing offer. If Meridian makes that offer, Leah said, Walker Systems takes it. Amanda keeps her title under new ownership, Victor negotiates a board seat or consulting fee, and Novatech is cut out entirely. It was clean. I'll give my sister that. A well-designed operation, the kind of plan that works when nobody is watching. The problem was, somebody was watching, and that somebody had spent 6 years building a company by being smarter than the people who underestimated her. Does Greg know? I don't think so. The communications bypassed his email entirely. He doesn't know his own daughter is sabotaging his last chance. Silence. Get Amanda here, tonight. Here? Novatech? My office, 8 p.m. Tell her I want to discuss partnership terms. She'll come. Leah studied me. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Thursday night, my corner office. City glittering through the windows. Desk lamp on, overhead lights off. The building was empty. No HVAC hum. The quiet was heavy. On my desk, a manila folder. Inside, the printed evidence, device match, relay logs, Meridian recipients' email headers. I had arranged it like a prosecutor's exhibit. Not to humiliate, to be undeniable. The elevator dinged at 8:04, 4 minutes late. Consistent. Amanda walked in wearing the same confident mask from the dinner, but her eyes were sharper. She sensed this wasn't a partnership discussion. You wanted to talk terms? Sit down. She sat. Her eyes flicked to the folder on the desk, then away. The micro-reaction of someone who knows bad news comes in folders. I opened the folder, slid the first page across the desk, said nothing. Amanda looked at it. Device match report, her name, her iPad, the Meridian connection. I slid the second page. Victor Hale's relay logs, timestamps, IP addresses, Meridian's VP of Corporate Development as the recipient. Third page, a summary of what was transmitted. Novatech's proposed valuation range, due diligence timeline, meeting notes, strategic priorities. I didn't speak during any of this. I let the paper talk, page by page, evidence by evidence, the way my father should have let my code talk years ago instead of dismissing it. Amanda's face went through a rapid series of expressions, shock, calculation, anger, and finally a settling, the expression of someone who has been caught and knows it. This doesn't prove anything. Someone could have used my device. The iPad was used from 3 locations: your apartment in Austin, the Hilton on Union Square, where you stayed during our meeting last week, and Zuni Cafe. Zuni Cafe, Tuesday night dinner. Her mouth closed. You were texting Victor during our dinner, not your husband, Victor Hale, who was forwarding our strategy to Meridian in real time. Silence, 30 seconds, an eternity in a quiet room. Amanda's denial died. The mask didn't crack. It fell. Not gradually. All at once. Like a wall that had been holding back water for years. She put her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook. I thought she was going to cry. She did, but only for 10 seconds. Then the tears ignited into something else. Her head came up, face wet but eyes burning. When she spoke, her voice was raw. Not the polished Amanda. not the dinner Amanda. This was the woman underneath all of those performances. And she was furious. You think you know what this was like? You think I did this because I'm jealous, because I'm petty? I think No, you're going to listen. For once in your life, you're going to sit there and listen to me. She stood, her chair scraped back. She was trembling, not with weakness, with pressure finally finding a way out. He put everything on me. Everything. The day you left, the day you packed a bag and disappeared, he walked into my room the next morning and said, "It's just us now. You're all I've got." I was 24 years old. And from that moment on, every single thing that happened at Walker Systems was mine to carry. Every quarter that missed projections, every client that left, every board meeting where Victor looked at me like I was a placeholder. Every time the numbers fell short, he didn't yell. He did something worse. He'd go quiet. He'd look at me with this disappointment, like I was proving that he'd bet on the wrong daughter. You gotta be free. You gotta disappear and build your own thing from scratch. You gotta fail in private. You gotta grow without anyone watching. I didn't get any of that. I was on stage every single day performing the role he wrote for me, knowing I wasn't good enough for it, knowing that the real version of what Walker Systems needed was somewhere in California, building it better, building it bigger, building it without us. Her voice cracked, the fury faltered. What was underneath was worse. It was grief. I knew. She was quieter now, almost to herself. I always knew you were the smart one. Even when I called your app a cute hobby, I knew. I said it because Dad was standing right there, and saying what he wanted to hear was the only way I knew how to survive in that house. This landed on me like a physical blow. I expected denial, deflection, maybe anger. I didn't expect honesty. And I didn't expect Amanda to say the one thing she'd never said in 32 years. I knew you were better. She sat back down slowly, like the explosion had emptied her. I didn't want to destroy the deal. I just couldn't stand the idea of you saving us, of you being the one who fixes everything, of Dad looking at you the way he should have looked at you all along, and realizing that every year he spent watching me was a waste. It wasn't a waste, Amanda. Don't be kind to me right now. I don't deserve it. No, you don't, but I'm not being kind. I'm being honest. He broke both of us, just in different ways. Silence held. Two sisters across a desk, the evidence between them, the anger spent, the masks on the floor. For the first time in 32 years, nothing between us except the truth. What are you going to do? I haven't decided. If you go public with the leak, I'll face charges, corporate espionage, maybe criminal. I know. Will you? I looked at Amanda, really looked. Past the blown-out hair and the cashmere and the performance. I saw what I didn't see at the dinner. Exhaustion. Not from a bad week, from a lifetime of being someone else's answer to a question they never should have asked. I saw two things at once. The woman who had betrayed me, who smiled at me over wine and sent our secrets to our enemy under the table. And the girl who had been locked in a glass case labeled Golden Child and told to perform perfection every day while our father watched and waited for her to fail. I was the daughter he ignored. Amanda was the daughter he crushed with attention. We were both his casualties. He just used different weapons. I'm not trying to be right, Amanda. I'm trying to save 73 people. Long pause. I know. That's what makes it worse. Amanda left. I sat alone. The manila folder was still open on the desk. The evidence pages spread like an autopsy. I picked up my phone, held it for a full minute before dialing. 3 rings, Greg answered. His voice was tired. The voice of a man who hadn't slept well in a week. Brittany? I know about Amanda. I know she's been communicating with Meridian Tech. I know Victor Hale is the intermediary. I know they've been feeding our deal strategy to your biggest competitor since the day after our meeting. Long exhale. Amanda, are you sure? I have the device logs, the relay chain, and the recipient at Meridian. Yes, I'm sure. Silence. I could hear him breathing, shallow, unsteady. And I know about the code, Dad. The word Dad came out before I planned it. I hadn't called him that since the conference room. It caught both of us. Synccore, BW_thesis_modified, my capstone project, my architecture, my code, the work you told me I wasn't capable of, running your company for 5 years. Silence, I counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. I got to 11 before he spoke. I'm losing everything, both daughters, the company, everything. You didn't lose us, Dad. You pushed us away. There's a difference. Brittany, please, whatever you decide about the partnership, about the code, about Amanda, I'll accept it. I don't have the right to ask for anything. No, you don't. I hung up, put the phone face down on the desk, sat with my hands flat on the surface. I'm losing everything. He said it like a man who had just realized the house was on fire. But the house had been burning for years. He just hadn't been standing close enough to feel the heat. Friday morning. Dawn. I hadn't gone home. Second time this month. Coffee cups lined up on the credenza, the city waking up outside the windows. Leah arrived at 6:30, found me at my desk, same clothes as yesterday, eyes red, not from crying, from not sleeping. You've been here all night. Pull the offer. She sat slowly. You're sure? I'm done, Leah. The code is stolen. The VP is sabotaging us. The board is questioning my judgment. The CEO is my father who can't decide if he's sorry or just desperate. There's nothing here to save. There are 73 people. I know, and I can't save them by setting myself on fire. She nodded, didn't argue. She'd watched me carry this for 2 weeks. She knew when the weight exceeded the capacity. I'll draft the withdrawal letter. Thank you. She left. I turned to the window. The fog was burning off, the bridge appearing piece by piece through the white. I told myself it was the right decision, the smart decision, the decision any CEO would make when the deal is compromised. The target is sabotaged from within, and the personal entanglements are catastrophic. I told myself I had done enough. But sitting in that chair, watching the fog lift, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not closure, not even anger. I felt like I was running away again. I went home Friday evening. My apartment in Pacific Heights, where nothing reminded me of Austin, nothing reminded me of Maple Drive, nothing reminded me of a father who couldn't see me or a sister who couldn't stop performing. I ate half a bowl of soup. I sat on the couch. I turned on the television and watched nothing. I let the noise fill the apartment the way silence used to fill the house I grew up in. At 10:37 that night, someone knocked on my door. Not Leah. She would text first. Not Amanda. She wouldn't dare. Not Greg. He didn't have my address. I opened the door. And standing in the hallway, holding a shoebox in both hands, with red eyes and bare feet in the corridor, the same bare feet she'd stood on at the bottom of the stairs in Austin 6 years ago, was my mother. She said, I should have come sooner. Can I come in? There are moments that split time into before and after. The laptop in the living room, the graduation chair, the parking garage, the conference room reveal. This was the last one. My mother stood in the hallway holding a shoebox in both hands, bare feet on the corridor carpet, hair gray now, cardigan over a blouse, no jacket. She had left Austin in a hurry. The shoebox was old, faded, one corner crushed. She held it the way you hold something that matters more than anything else you own. Red eyes, but she wasn't crying. She was past crying. I should have come sooner. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Her feet were cold on the hardwood. I saw the goosebumps on her ankles. A detail so small it shouldn't matter. It broke something in me anyway. She looked around the apartment. White walls, clean surfaces, no photographs. It's beautiful. It's empty. I know. We sat. She set the shoebox on the coffee table, folded her hands in her lap. The posture of a woman who learned to take up as little space as possible. How did you find my address? Rachel. One word, and with it a thread began to pull. She lifted the lid. Inside, letters, stacked neatly. Handwritten envelopes, each addressed to Brittany Walker, the Oakland studio, an old P.O. box, Novatech headquarters. Each envelope dated in her careful print. 2 inches of envelopes packed tight. What are these? 47 letters, one for every month since you left. I reached for the stack, hesitated. You wrote me every month? Every month, sometimes twice. I never received a single one. She nodded. I know, your father intercepted them. The room shifted. Something in the air changed. The first 3 I mailed to your Oakland address. They came back. Returned to sender. I didn't write that. He did. After that, I tried a P.O. box. He found those, too. He was checking the mail every morning before I woke up. Then I tried mailing from a different zip code. He found the receipts in my purse. Her voice didn't shake. The measured calm of a woman who learned to deliver devastating information without triggering the person she was married to. He didn't scream. He just said, "She left. Let her go." And he took the letters. Every single one. For 6 years. Where were they? His desk, bottom drawer, locked. I found them 3 weeks ago. 47 letters. 6 years. Every month, my mother sat down at the kitchen table in Austin and wrote to a daughter who never wrote back. Not because I didn't want to. Because her husband was standing at the mailbox every morning, erasing her from my life one envelope at a time. I opened the first letter, June 16th, 2019, the day after I left. My darling Brittany, you left last night. I stood at the bottom of the stairs and watched you go. I wanted to stop you, but you needed to leave, and I needed to let you. I'm so proud of you. I have always been proud of you, even when I was quiet. Especially when I was quiet. That last line, the callback across 7 chapters. It landed like a bell tolling. She had written it the morning after I left, before Novatech, before any of it. She had known I was special when I was just a girl with a suitcase and a broken heart. I opened another, September 2021. Inside, a newspaper clipping. Novatech Industries secures Series B funding. She had circled it and written, "That's my daughter." Another March 2023 Forbes 30 under 30. She wrote, "I showed this to the lady at the grocery store. She probably thought I was crazy." 47 letters. 6 years. Every month, my mother sat down at the kitchen table in Austin and wrote to a daughter who never wrote back. Not because I didn't want to. Because her husband was standing at the mailbox every morning, erasing her from my life one envelope at a time. She had been my audience for 6 years, and I never knew. Beneath the letters at the bottom of the shoebox, a USB drive. Blue, no label. There's something else you need to know. She held it between her thumb and forefinger. Such a small thing. Light enough to lose in a pocket. Heavy enough to change everything. The night before your graduation, you fell asleep at your desk. Your laptop was open. Your capstone project was on the screen. I went still. I didn't understand most of it. The code, the diagrams. But I read what your professor wrote. He said it was the most original work he'd seen in 10 years. I knew it was special. The same way I felt it when you showed me that app at 14, the one your father looked at for 4 seconds. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it mattered. So I copied it. The whole project folder. I had a feeling I should keep it somewhere he couldn't reach it. After you left, when Syncor started making money, and everyone at Walker Systems was talking about this breakthrough architecture, I looked at the USB drive. I didn't understand the code, but I understood the file names. I saw the structure. And I saw the same structure in the Syncor marketing materials your father was so proud of. She looked directly at me. I've known for 4 years, baby. I knew he took your work. I kept the evidence. Why didn't you tell me? Because the letters weren't reaching you. Because every time I tried to reach you, he blocked me. And because I was afraid that if I told you before you were ready, it would destroy you. You were building something. I couldn't let his theft be the thing that stopped you. My mother. The woman who gripped a chair and said nothing at Thanksgiving, who whispered in kitchens and stood barefoot at the bottom of stairs. She had been holding a bomb for 4 years. She had sat across the dinner table from my father, watched him take credit for stolen code and said nothing. Not because she was weak, because she was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for me to be strong enough to hear it. I had one more question. The one I'd been holding since Oakland, since I opened an envelope and found $400 and a business card for a woman I'd never heard of. The envelope, the $400, Rachel Simmons. How did you know an angel investor in Palo Alto? She smiled. The first time all night, the smile of someone finally allowed to set a secret down. Rachel and I were roommates at UT Austin, freshman year, 1983. We stayed close after college. Birthday calls, Christmas cards, the kind of friendship that survives distance. The week before you graduated, I called her. I hadn't called in 2 years. I said, "My daughter is brilliant. She's going to need help, and her father won't give it to her. If she ever calls you, please, take the meeting." You called her before I left? I could see what was coming. The graduation, the data entry comment. I knew you were going to leave, and I knew you wouldn't have anyone. So I put Rachel's card in the envelope, and I prayed you'd find it. When I called Rachel, she said, "I've been waiting for someone like you." She wrote me a check that day. She knew who you were from the moment you called. I told her everything. Your coding, your projects, your capstone. She wasn't waiting for someone like you. She was waiting for you. The condition, don't use your last name. Rachel's idea, to protect you from being dismissed as Greg Walker's daughter, from the name being a ceiling instead of a floor. Novatech, $4.5 billion, 312 employees, Forbes 30 under 30, the company I called self-made. And it started with a phone call from a mother in Austin to a college roommate in Palo Alto, made from a kitchen phone while my father was at work, a week before my world fell apart. I was never self-made, I was mother-made, and she never told me. She never took credit. She never said, "I'm the reason Rachel answered your call." She just let me believe it was mine. I set the USB drive on the table, next to the 47 letters, next to the Forbes clipping with "That's my daughter," next to the first letter with "especially when I was quiet." And then I cried. Not gracefully. Not a single dignified tear rolling down a composed face. I cried the way people cry when they've been holding a wall upright for 6 years and someone finally says, "You can put it down." I sat on my couch in my empty apartment and I cried so hard my ribs hurt. I cried for the 14-year-old holding a laptop. I cried for the girl who put the Berkeley letter back in her pocket. I cried for the woman in the parking garage who broke for 10 minutes and never let herself break again. I cried for the 6 years I thought I was alone, and I cried because I wasn't. I was never alone. My mother had been there every single day, in letters I never read, in phone calls I never knew about, in a business card tucked into an envelope, in a USB drive hidden in a shoebox. She had been fighting for me from the shadows, and the only thing she asked in return was to be let through the door. She didn't hug me immediately. She waited. She let me cry. She had spent 30 years in a house where showing emotion was treated as weakness, and she knew the difference between comforting someone and interrupting their healing. When the crying slowed, she put her hand on my back. One hand, palm flat, between the shoulder blades. The gesture of a mother who has held this particular daughter in this particular way since she was small enough to carry. I couldn't protect you from him, but I could do this. You did enough, Mom. You did more than enough. I should have done more. I should have left him years ago. You stayed because you thought you could protect us from the inside. Yes, you did. We sat on that couch until 3 a.m. She fell asleep with her head on a pillow I brought from the bedroom. I covered her with the blanket from the closet, the fleece one I'd bought at Target during my first Oakland winter. I sat in the chair across from her and watched her sleep the way she must have watched me sleep 1,000 times. And I thought about 73 people in Austin who were about to lose their jobs. I thought about Amanda, not the saboteur but the girl who said "cute hobby" because her father was listening. I thought about Greg, not the thief but the man who said "I looked for you" in a doorway. A man who blocked his wife's letters with one hand and claimed to search for his daughter with the other. And I thought about my mother, who had spent 6 years writing letters that were stolen, making phone calls that were secret, and keeping evidence that was dangerous. All so that her daughter would have a chance. I picked up my phone. It was 3:12 a.m. I called Leah. She answered on the second ring. Because Leah always answers. Don't send the withdrawal letter. Pause. Okay. Put the offer back on the table, but change the terms. What terms? My terms. I wasn't going to save Walker Systems for my father. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I wasn't doing it because it was the right business decision. I was doing it for the 73 people who needed their jobs, for my mother who had been fighting for me from the shadows for 6 years, and for myself. Because I refused to let his failures define my choices. Because walking away now would mean everything she sacrificed was for nothing. I was done running. It was time to finish this. The 12 days after my mother's visit were filled with legal drafts, financial modeling, and due diligence revisions. Leah ran point on operations. I reviewed every page personally. This deal was not going to fail on a technicality. I had spent 12 days building an offer that was fair, not generous. Fair. Generous is what you do when you have power and want to be liked. Fair is what you do when you have power and want to be right. Wednesday morning, April 9th, Novatech headquarters. The large conference room with the walnut table and floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Bay Bridge. The room we use for signings, not pitches. I arrived at 7, 2 hours early. I placed the documents myself. 7 folders, 1 per term. I was building a courtroom. 1 additional folder, unmarked, black, I placed at my own seat. Inside, the Syncor code comparison. Mom's USB drive analysis. The BW_thesis_modified directory name. This folder would be opened once, shown once, and its contents spoken aloud exactly once. I wore the same charcoal suit from the first Walker meeting, but today I added my mother's silver Timex on my left wrist, the one she handed me the morning after the shoebox. On my right, the tag Hoyer I bought after the Series B. 2 watches, 2 women. Leah arrived at 7:30. You ready? I've been ready for 6 years. That's not what I asked. No, I'm not ready, but I'm doing it anyway. 9 o'clock. The Walker contingent arrived. Greg, Amanda, Victor Hale, their counsel. On our side, me, Leah, Helen Park from the board, and James Okafor, our general counsel. I sat at the head, Greg at the far end, Amanda to his left, Victor to his right, the same distance as 3 weeks ago but reversed. In that room, Greg walked in not knowing his daughter was at the other end. Today, he knew. No small talk, no coffee. This was a closing, not a negotiation. I stood. Here are the terms of Novatech's acquisition of Walker Systems. They are non-negotiable. Term 1. Novatech will acquire 100% of Walker Systems at fair market value, plus a 12% goodwill premium. This values the company above what any other bidder would offer, including Meridian Tech. The mention of Meridian landed like a stone. Amanda's face went white. Victor's jaw tightened. Term 2. All 73 current employees will be retained. No layoffs for 24 months. Term 3. The Walker Systems brand will continue as a subsidiary. Clients will experience continuity. Term 4. Greg Walker will retire from all operational and advisory roles, effective upon signing. He will retain the honorific title of Founder Emeritus, no operational authority, no board seat. Greg nodded. His hands were flat on the table. Term 5. Amanda Walker Ross will step down as VP of Operations, effective upon signing. Amanda stiffened. I paused, then added, Amanda will be offered a 12-month advisory consultancy at her current compensation, with the option to transition to a permanent role if she chooses. This is an offer, not a requirement. Amanda's eyes widened. She expected termination. She expected punishment. She got a choice. For 1 second, we made eye contact across the table. Not warmth, not forgiveness, recognition. Term 6. I opened the black folder, took out 2 pages. Syncor, the flagship product of Walker Systems, is built on a code base that matches 87% of a capstone project submitted to the University of California, Berkeley, in June of 2019. The project was authored by Brittany Ann Walker. The directory in Walker Systems server is labeled BW_thesis_modified. The code was imported in August of 2019, 3 months after the original author left the Walker household. Silence. Absolute silence. Helen Park's pen stopped moving. I want you to know that I know. Every line, every function, my architecture, my optimization pathways, my code, the work you said I wasn't capable of, running your company for 5 years. I looked at my father. And I'm still choosing to proceed with this acquisition, not because you deserve it, because it's the right thing to do. I watched his face as the weight arrived. Not shock. He already knew. What hit him was that I knew and I was still here. I hadn't used it to destroy him. I'd used it to show him the difference between revenge and justice. Term 7. Syncor will be rebuilt from the ground up under Novatech's technical direction. The new architecture will be original. A full IP audit will ensure no further misappropriation exists. These are the terms. Victor Hale spoke for the first time. This is extortion. You're using a questionable code comparison to force terms that strip the board of any oversight. Mr. Hale. I said his name the way a judge says a defendant's name. On March 19th, the day after our initial meeting, encrypted communications began between a device registered to Walker Systems and the VP of Corporate Development at Meridian Tech. Those communications contained Novatech's proposed valuation range, due diligence timeline, and strategic priorities. The device was registered to Amanda Walker Ross. The relay was routed through a laptop on your home network. Victor's face went gray. You served as the intermediary in a corporate espionage operation designed to funnel our deal strategy to a competitor. Your continued presence in this room is not something I'm willing to accommodate. Victor looked at Greg. Greg stared at the table. Are you going to let her... Greg, very quiet. Victor, stop. Victor stood, gathered his folder, walked to the door, stopped, turned, saw Leah holding a second folder with the full communication logs. He closed his mouth and left. Victor Hale was the only person who left that room without being offered a second chance, because he was the only person who had never been a victim. He was an opportunist, and opportunists don't get grace. They get consequences. The room resettled. Amanda hadn't spoken since term 5. She looked at Greg. Greg looked at her. Take the deal, Dad. 4 words. The most important 4 words Amanda had ever spoken. 3 weeks ago, she would rather have watched the company burn than let me save it. Now she was telling our father to let me do exactly that. Greg looked at Amanda for a long time. He was seeing both daughters in the same frame for the first time. The one he dismissed and the one he crushed. Both wounded, both present, both asking him to do the only thing he had left to do. He picked up the pen, signed. He signed his name the way he used to sign my report cards, quickly, without looking at the page. But this time, I think he knew exactly what he was signing. The company he built on code he stole, to the daughter he stole it from, on terms set by a woman he once said wasn't good enough for tech. The pen touched the page for 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, 30 years of Walker family history was rewritten. The room emptied. Amanda left first. She looked at me as she passed but didn't speak. I nodded. Later. Not now. Helen Park shook my hand. Leah collected the folders. Greg remained seated at the far end of the table. He hadn't moved. I asked Leah to give us the room. She hesitated. She knew what this conversation would cost me. She nodded and left. Father, daughter, the Bay Bridge through the windows. I need to tell you something, not because you asked, because I should have told you years ago. I waited. I used your code. I knew what I was doing. After you left, I found your capstone project on the old ThinkPad in your room. I showed it to our lead developer. He said it was years ahead of anything Walker Systems had. I told him to use it. I told myself it was just a student project, that you'd never know, that it was just sitting there, unused. But I knew whose work it was. And I knew the girl who wrote it was somewhere in California, eating ramen, trying to build something from nothing while I was building my company on her work. He stopped, looked at his hands. I don't know when it started, the lying to myself. Maybe it was the moment you showed me that app at 14, and I felt something I didn't expect. I felt afraid, because my daughter was smarter than me, and instead of being proud, I was threatened. He said the word threatened. I had waited 14 years to hear my father say one honest thing about why he treated me the way he did. And there it was. Not cruelty, not indifference, fear. I don't deserve your help. No, you don't. But the people who work for you do. They didn't steal anyone's code. They didn't intercept anyone's letters. They didn't tell their daughter she wasn't good enough. 73 people. That's who I did this for. And your mother? Yes, and Mom? His voice broke. Your mother never stopped believing in you. I know, she showed me. He heard the emphasis on showed. She wrote me 47 letters, one every month. You intercepted them all. His head dropped. You told her to let me go, and then you told me you looked for me. Both things are true. Both things can't be true, Dad. They can. I wanted you to stay gone, and I wanted to know you were okay. I wanted control, and I wanted relief from the guilt. I was two things at once, selfish and sorry. That's the truth, that's all of it. It was the most honest thing my father had ever said. Not an excuse, an admission. He was selfish and sorry. He wanted me gone, and he wanted me safe. He stole my code, and he missed my face. He was not a villain. He was a man who loved his daughter badly enough to lose her. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. I stood, buttoned my jacket, walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. I'm not forgiving you today. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year. He looked up. But I'm leaving the door open. That's more than you gave me. Thank you. Don't thank me, earn it. I walked out. The door closed with a soft click, not a slam. I don't close doors with violence. I close them with precision. Earn it, 2 words. The hardest sentence I'd ever said. Because it meant I was giving him something I wasn't sure he deserved. Time. The chance to prove that the confession in that room was real. I didn't believe he could. Not yet. But I believed he should have the chance to try. Because that's what my mother would do. The deal closed 31 days later. Quietly, professionally. The wire transfer went through on a Tuesday morning in May while I was drinking coffee at my desk. Walker Systems became a wholly owned subsidiary of Novatech. The transition team introduced themselves to 73 employees who had spent months wondering if they would still have jobs by summer. They did. Greg cleaned out his office over a weekend, alone. Amanda told me later that he took only 2 things, a family photograph from 1999, and the pen he used to sign the acquisition papers. Amanda accepted the advisory consultancy. 3 weeks after the signing, she sent me an email. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for Dad. I didn't reply. But I forwarded her name to a recruiter I trusted. She didn't need to know it was me. Victor Hale disappeared from the industry within 6 months. He wasn't worth the paperwork. My mother moved into an apartment 3 miles from Maple Drive, her first solo apartment in 32 years. We talked on the phone every Sunday. She never told me what to feel about my father, she just listened. I sat in my office on the 42nd floor, looking out at the San Francisco skyline, and I realized something I hadn't expected. Winning didn't feel the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt quiet. The same kind of quiet that filled the house at 14 Maple Drive when nobody was fighting and nobody was talking. Except this time the quiet wasn't empty. It was full. Full of 73 jobs saved, full of 47 letters read, full of a USB drive in my desk drawer, and a silver watch on my wrist and a phone call every Sunday. The quiet was full. And for the first time in my life, so was I. But I wasn't finished yet. 6 months later, Walker Systems still existed. Not as it was. Nothing stays as it was. But as something better. The transition team had spent the summer rebuilding the infrastructure and doing what Novatech does best. Making things work. The 73 employees who had been waiting for the sky to fall found out it wasn't falling. Their jobs were intact. Their benefits were upgraded. Nobody in that Austin office was going to feel invisible on my watch. 3 months after the acquisition, I received an email from a woman named Donna in client services. She'd been there for 19 years. She wrote, "I'm 57 years old. I have a mortgage." I was looking at job listings for the first time in 2 decades when the Novatech team walked in. "You saved my job. I don't know why you did it. But thank you." I read that email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat with it. I didn't save Walker Systems for my father. I saved it for Donna and 72 others whose names I was still learning. The deal was never about revenge. It was about the people who get caught in the crossfire when families go to war. Amanda left Walker Systems on the last day of May. She served the advisory consultancy for 1 month before deciding she didn't want it. She told Leah, "I need to build something that's mine. Not my father's company, not my sister's consultancy fee, mine." I understood. Maybe for the first time, I understood Amanda completely. Because that was exactly how I had felt the night I left Austin. She opened a small consulting firm in Dallas. Not Austin, a new city, the same way I had chosen Oakland. A new name, Ross Advisory, using her married name. She was starting over at 32, building from the ground up. We didn't speak often, a text on her birthday, a short phone call at Christmas. But in August, I forwarded her firm information to a Novatech client who needed operational consulting. I didn't sign the email. 3 weeks later, she landed the contract, her biggest client in the first year. She sent me a text in September. No context, just, "Thank you." I replied, "For what?" She didn't respond. We understood each other the way sisters do, in the spaces between words. I don't know if Amanda and I will ever be close. But we stopped being enemies. And for 2 daughters of Greg Walker, that was a kind of miracle. Greg retired. He moved into a smaller house north of downtown Austin, not 14 Maple Drive. He sold that house in July. We ate dinner once a month. I flew to Austin, or he flew to San Francisco. The dinners were difficult, not hostile, not warm. Difficult the way anything is difficult when 2 people are trying to build a bridge across a canyon they both helped dig. Sometimes he asked genuine questions about Novatech. He listened the way he should have listened when I was 14. Sometimes we sat in silence. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. The last time I visited his Austin house, I saw something on his kitchen table, a framed photograph. The 4 of us, Greg, Diane, Amanda, Brittany. 1999. I'm 5 years old in the photo. Mom is wearing a yellow dress. Dad is smiling, the kind of real smile I can barely remember seeing in person. He noticed me looking at it. "That's the last photo where everyone is happy. That's a lot of weight to put on one picture." "It's the only weight I have left." I looked at the 5-year-old version of me, completely unaware that the man behind her would spend the next 23 years failing her. I felt compassion, not for my father, for her. Next to the photograph was the pen, the one he used to sign the acquisition papers. He had kept it the way I had kept the letters. Greg Walker was not a good father. I don't say that with anger anymore. He was afraid of his daughter's talent, and he let that fear poison 30 years. But he was trying, slowly, clumsily. He said, "I'm proud of you" once, over dinner in August, and it came out so awkwardly that we both pretended it hadn't happened. I wasn't ready to call that progress, but I wasn't ready to call it nothing either. My mother flew to San Francisco for the first time last Sunday. I picked her up Saturday evening. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant. Light things, saving the heavy thing for Sunday. Sunday morning I drove her to the Novatech building. The lobby was empty. I had arranged that. No employees, no meetings, just the 2 of us. The elevator opened. My mother stepped into the lobby. Marble floors, the logo on the wall, Sunday light streaming through the windows. She stopped, looked up at the logo, stood still for a long time. The way she looked at my capstone project the night before graduation. The way she looked at the Forbes article she pasted into letter number 31. The way she had been looking at everything I built for 6 years, from a distance, through newspaper clippings and web pages. But now she was here. Inside the building, not looking through a screen or a window, here. I gave her the tour. We walked through the empty floors. She touched surfaces the way she touches things that matter to her, lightly, with her fingertips, as if memorizing them by feel. We reached the 42nd floor, my office. She walked in, looked at the desk, the view, the Bay Bridge, the framed photo on the credenza. It wasn't the family photo from 1999. It was a photo of her, taken at the airport Saturday evening. Diane walking through the arrivals gate with a smile I had never seen before, the smile of a woman visiting a world her daughter built. She saw the photo, she looked at me. She pulled me into a hug, the kind that holds years of distance in its arms and refuses to let go. In my office, on the 42nd floor, in the building I built with code she protected and a phone call she made. My mother held me, and I let her. I was never self-made. No one is. Every person who builds something great was carried by someone they didn't see. My mother carried me. Rachel carried me. Leah carried me. Self-made is a myth. We are all someone else made, and the bravest thing you can do is admit it. Later that Sunday, my phone rang. Rachel Simmons. Your mom called me yesterday, before she flew out. She read the Fortune article. She's very proud. I looked at Diane on the couch, reading a paperback she'd brought from Austin. She always was, I just didn't know. You know now, that's what matters. The circle closed. A phone call from a kitchen in 2019, a business card in an envelope, a seed check, a company, a shoebox, and now a mother on a couch, a daughter in a chair, and a college roommate on the phone. All connected by a thread that started 30 years before I was born. That's where Novatech began. Not in a garage, in a friendship between two women who stayed in each other's lives long enough for one of them to save the other's daughter. People ask me sometimes what revenge feels like. They expect me to say it feels like victory, like vindication, like the moment in the movie when the music swells and the bad guy finally gets what's coming to him. It doesn't feel like that. Revenge, real revenge, the kind that changes your life instead of just ruining someone else's, feels like building something so solid that the people who doubted you have to walk through the front door and ask for help. It feels like choosing mercy when you could have chosen destruction. It doesn't taste like victory, it tastes like clarity. The moment you realize that the person who hurt you was smaller than you thought, and you were bigger than they said. I learned things this year that I wish I had known sooner. I learned that forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It's a door you open for yourself so you can walk through it and leave the hurt in the room behind you. I haven't walked through that door with my father. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I've unlocked it. I learned that strength isn't silence. My mother was quiet for 30 years, and I used to think that meant she was weak. She wasn't. She was the strongest person in the house. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it shows up with a shoebox. I learned that sisters can wound each other in ways no one else can, and heal each other in ways no one else can either. And I learned the most important thing of all. I didn't become the person my father believed in. I became the person I believed in, and that was always enough. My father believed in the version of me that was small, quiet, and easy to overlook. A footnote in the Walker family story. I believed in a different version. The girl who coded an app at 14, the woman who pitched investors for 9 months before one said yes, the CEO who sat across from the man who raised her and said, "I know what you did, and I'm choosing to help anyway." That version of me was always there. She was there in the ramen apartment. She was there in the parking garage. She was there in the conference room and on the couch at 3 a.m. with her mother's hand on her back. She was always enough. I just had to stop waiting for someone else to tell me that. I told you this story because I think you needed to hear it. Maybe not the details. The code, the acquisition, the conference room. Those are mine. But the feeling underneath? The feeling of being overlooked by someone who should have seen you? Of being told you weren't enough by someone whose opinion shouldn't have mattered but did? That feeling isn't just mine. I know it isn't. Because every time I tell a story like this, I hear from women who say, "That was me, that was my family, that was my life." So if this story reminded you of someone in your family, someone you used to be, or someone you're still becoming, I want to hear about it. Not because I'm curious, because your story matters. It matters the way my mother's letters mattered, even when no one was reading them. Leave a comment. Tell me one thing, just one, that this story made you think about. A memory, a person, a moment when someone underestimated you and you proved them wrong, or a moment when someone believed in you and you didn't know it until later. And if you're new here, if this is the first story you've heard on this channel, I'd be grateful if you subscribed, not for the numbers, for the reason we do this. Because every week we tell stories about people who were told they were too small, too quiet, too old, too late, too much, or not enough. And every week those people prove that the ones who underestimated them were wrong. You are not too small, you are not too late, you are not too anything. You are enough, you've always been enough. You just need someone to say it out loud, I looked out the window at San Francisco, the bridge, the bay, the fog beginning to roll in from the ocean, the way it does every afternoon, soft and certain, covering the city in something that looks like forgiveness. And on my desk, in the bottom drawer, 47 letters from a mother who never stopped writing. I closed the drawer, I picked up my coffee, I went back to work. There was still so much to build. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.